Well, hello, everybody. We'll go ahead and get this meeting started. We are here for the regular evening meeting on August 25th of the City Council. We'll start with an invocation as a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the
to
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up, roll call. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent.
Here.
Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Woodings.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. And we have a request for approval of the minutes of August 18th.
Madam
both
Mayor.
The work session. Oh, is there something else?
Yeah, before we do that, I move that we have one item to pull off
Oh,
of
sure.
the agenda. So I move that we defer consideration of ORD 30-20 to a date certain of September 1st.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now a request for approval of the minutes of the work session and evening meeting of August 18th.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of the work session and regular evening meeting for August 18th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thanks. And next up under special business, we have Chief Lee joining us here to provide an update on police policies. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me make sure this is. Perfect. Technology. Madam Mayor, members of council, members of the public, both here and online, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you tonight. As previously requested by council, this is one in a series of presentations related to policies and information about the Boise Police Department. So today I'll be presenting an analysis of the Boise Police Department's use of force data, as well as talking about some of our future goals and data collection. So I'd like to start out, as the slide indicates, that in over 99.9% of calls, the police department doesn't use force. It's very, very rare when the Boise Police Department does actually use force. If there's a crime in progress or any type of confrontation, officers are trained to first use their uniformed presence as well as de-escalation techniques to try to safely and calmly resolve a situation. By way of example, last week, officers made contact with a man who had called 911 over 50 times during the last month. He was in mental health crisis. He was down at 13th and Myrtle, and he was hiding in the bushes armed with a machete. I don't think it takes much imagination to envision a scenario where that would not play out very well in the public's expectations, but officers were able to de-escalate the situation quickly using a calm and measured voice. We're able to calm the gentleman. We're able to seek out from him what he needed, and we're able to ensure that he was well connected with services, ensure that he was indeed the person calling 911, and develop a plan so that he could have the medical services he needed to help get him into a more stable state. So as an example, that is much more typical of the interactions you'd see from the Boise Police Department than a force encounter.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Chief, could you just briefly touch for the public and people who may be listening what force actually is? It's not always shooting someone.
No, it covers a wide range of things. And thank you, Mr. Councilmember. One of the challenges we have, and I'll talk about it much later in another slide, one of the challenges that we as a police agency have is comparing what force is relative to other cities. There isn't a universal definition that's been accepted. Generally speaking, most police departments look at it as any form of police intervention to physical resistance that would likely result in an injury. Some police departments define it different. My former place of employment, it was any police intervention against an act of physical resistance to control. So it was a different bar. So comparing sort of the apples to apples is very challenging. When we get to some of the peer cities and some of those examples, we were able to go through and find ones by examining their policy that had very similar definitions, so that at least we could have a much more apples to apples comparison, both in size of city as well. But for our purposes, any police intervention, physical intervention that has a likelihood to cause injury would be the type of force that is both reported and reviewed. So we'll get to that in a second, sir. So the Boise Police Department in 2019 had 585 calls for service. So that's about an average of 418. We'll just round it to 420 calls for service per day. When we break that down to use of force, there was an average use of force every 3 days. So we're going about 3 days between some form of force being used. The other common question that occurs and we frequently hear is that people, members of the public, will go by, they'll see a lot of officers at a scene and they'll say, why are there so many police officers on this particular call? There's a belief that more officers might likely lead to a greater occurrence of force, when it's actually quite the contrary. By bringing in more resources, people with specialized training and tactics, we have a greater likelihood of resolving an event than having it turn into a force event. So recently, just last month, we had an individual who threw a lit propane torch onto a protected party's house in an attempted arson, then fled back to their residence, barricaded themselves inside their residence. We had information that they were under the influence of methamphetamine and had access to several firearms. Rather than have a traditional patrol response, we were able to access the officers from the Special Operations Unit, our SWAT team. They were able to contain that individual. They were able to call out and negotiate with him. They eventually had to introduce a small amount of gas to motivate him to leave the house, but they were able to remove him from the house without a greater confrontation of force. In a lot of other cities, that could have come out with much more catastrophic consequences. So again, that theory of lowest force to achieve the lawful objective is what governs the philosophy of the Boise Police Department. So the force policy, why we have good practices here in the city with the force policy and our approach, the policy itself is under review and revision. We want to make sure that it's reflective of national best practices. And we want to ensure that we are at the cutting edge of those practices. So the key part, though, for our force policy is that it operates under the Graham standard. And essentially the Graham standard, it's the law that governs the land about force. And it establishes an objectively reasonable standard for the force that was used against an individual. Would a reasonable police officer with same or similar training under same or similar circumstances viewed that use of force as appropriate given the level of resistance? And so some of the factors that calculate into that would be the severity of the crime, whether the subject was an immediate threat to the public, the officers, or others, how the subject was actively resisting, or if they were actively resisting efforts to control, arrest, or if they were attempting to evade or seek flight from the ability to arrest. So those are all the factors in a nutshell, very quickly, high level, what they look at when they make an assessment about whether or not a particular type of force should be applied to a situation. And it's looked at in the totality of the circumstances that are there. There are some conversations of a more restrictive policy in some organizations around the United States. That is a challenge because if fundamentally what we're looking at is if force is to be reasonable and we were to seek something more restrictive than a reasonable approach, by very definition, we're asking officers to put themselves in an unreasonable position when making that assessment about force application. The Boise.
Did I hear somebody?
Chief, could I ask a quick question around that? You mentioned whether or not a suspect might be trying to flee. Is that judged in concert with the severity of the crime? In other words, would you allow someone to flee if this crime isn't very severe or if it doesn't look like they're in fleeing going to create more danger?
Yes, Madam President. In short, that would be the case. We're looking at the totality of the circumstances. So it would include the severity of the crime. Other factors that would be considered here in our city would be whether or not the subject is known, whether or not there's the opportunity to apprehend them at another time that is not as confrontational a situation, whether or not they present a danger to the public in their flight. And so there's a multitude of other variables. And then again, to Councilmember Bajan's point, again, we want to emphasize that force is really any physical intervention that has a probability of causing injury. So we're talking about a pretty low level. That could literally be the person trying to run away and you're shoving him in the back, knocking him to the ground so you could take him into custody.
Thank you.
To that end, here in Boise, every officer is required, again, using the definition of force that we've established. Every officer is required to report incidents of force. Every reported incident of force is reviewed by their supervisors. So again, it's any technique with a higher likelihood of causing injury. So impact tools, if you see a strike with a baton or even a strike with a fist, that's a reportable use of force. The other thing that skews the data when we get to the numbers here in a couple of slides, it's important to understand is that any complaint of injury, even if the officer did not use any form of force, all they did was simply put the person in handcuffs, a complaint of injury will generate a force report. And so the data numbers are off a little bit because a complaint of injury calculates as a use of force here, even though the officer may not have used force. It will be investigated the same way. We have an early intervention system that will look through officers' use of force and indicate if somebody is statistically outside the norm for their peers to allow our supervisors to help intervene early and see if there is a pattern or a performance issue. Uses of deadly force are investigated differently. As many of you are aware, we have a critical incident task force that's a multi-agency task force. If there is a use of deadly force in the city of Boise, while we may lend technical assistance to the investigation, the lead investigating agency is always another agency to increase both transparency and to ensure that there's trust and legitimacy in the process and the investigation to the public. And then lastly, the Office of Police Oversight does review any of our critical incident use of force. So any in-custody death, they also review any use of deadly force as well, and they're able to review any use of force that they deem that they wish to review.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hello, Chief. Thank you so much for your presentation so far. I have a question about the Office of Police Oversight. Is there any sort of, I don't know what to call it, firewall, something that separates the Office of Police Oversight and keeps them, for lack of a better word, pure from BPD, so that when they get either complaints from the public or they're called upon to review an incident, that there is no contamination of relationships between that office and police officers?
So they are an independent office governed by their own body. They have access to our reports independent of whether or not we offer them to them. They are able to respond to any use of deadly force and conduct their own firsthand information. There is some limit because it is a crime scene that's being processed. There is some limit to what they may be able to access at a crime scene, but all the information that be presented, they hear firsthand with their own eyes and ears to gather information. So they are free to make their own rulings, judgment, and assessment of the Boise Police Department, independent of anything we may say.
Madam Mayor, just a quick follow-up. When there is not an active incident that they're investigating or reviewing, what kind of firewall is in place in terms of keeping that staff from intermingling with BPD?
They're their own independent body. They have access to our information if they want it. They have access to our people if they seek it. They're not co-located, co-housed with us. As a matter of fact, they're housed down here at City Hall. We're at City Hall West. And so there's as much a physical firewall as we can have. We do brief them of ongoing investigations, but they're an autonomous body to make their own decisions.
Chief, I guess what I'm asking is fraternizing, like socializing, that sort of thing between staff members.
I'm not aware of any presently. Nobody's brought that to my attention.
Okay.
So I don't believe that that is an issue. But I'd be happy to speak to you about that separately, council member, if there is some concern to that matter.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
So I'll talk a little bit about specific numbers for use of force. We'll talk about information from June of 2015 to roughly June of 2020. In that time frame, there were 547 incidences that we would categorize as a force event in those 5 years. What's important to understand is there's actually 1,062 individual uses of force. So if Councilmember Bajent was a police officer and him and I were at a call and say for whatever reason we took an individual into custody, they fell down, they had a scrape, that's an injury, it would be reported. We would both have to write an incident, a force incident report. So there'd be two separate incidents reports that were generated, individual uses of force. There'd be independent investigations as to our role into that to evaluate whether or not that was appropriate, but it would be captured as a single incident for the purposes of talking the totality of the number that had occurred during the year. So to kind of put that in context for everybody, it's again, a force event about every 3 days. So I'll give something much more benign that will help frame this for folks. A study done last year on how frequently the average American dined out. This was obviously pre-pandemic, but the average American ate meals out 5.9 times per week. So we're talking about half as often as people would go out to eat. We have a force event occurring in the city of Boise to kind of help frame that up in something that's a little bit easier to wrap your mind around. Of the particular types of force that we use, there are vehicular uses of force. Those would be instances where we either rammed or used what is known as a pursuit intervention technique to disable a vehicle. There's an upper threshold to the speed at which we allow that to be used. You will occasionally read information about the pursuit intervention technique's safety and some concern about it. Almost always that is in jurisdictions where they have no upper threshold to the speed at which you can try to disable a vehicle. Ours, through best practice and looking at other agencies as well as information related to crashes, ours is at a much lower threshold to ensure that the vehicle is still controllable at any point when it was disabled via PIT, a pursuit intervention technique. Even with that, pretty low application numbers if you look at it over the 5-year span, 8 PITs, 2 vehicle rammings. Taser is applied more significantly. There are 87 applications of a taser over that 5-year span where you would think of when most people think of an application of a taser, either when the probes are actually launched out of the taser towards somebody. The drive stun, where the taser is still delivering electrical shock over a smaller area, 14 times during that 5-year period. We used to also capture information whenever the safety was turned off, it would put on a visible red designator. We would capture how many times that occurred, 14 times during that same time window. Pepper spray, as most people call it, is known as OC spray. There were 7 applications in 5 years. It's relatively low. And for people that are wondering why is pepper spray not used more than the taser, the bottom line is really the effectiveness of the tool. Pepper spray has a duration that has to occur before it becomes effective after it's deployed on an individual. And so if it's being used to control, active aggression towards somebody, there is this delay where the officer has to deliver the pepper spray and wait for it to begin to become effective. It's also markedly less effective on people who are under the influence of controlled substances or in acute mental health crisis. It doesn't have the same effect. It's not as reliable a tool, essentially, for using force as a mechanism of control. If we look at other types of force over that same 5-year window, you'll see that these are what we would call what's referred to technically as a hard empty hand technique. And that's a technique using bare hands, with the exception obviously here of a couple of them, like the perineal, the suprascapular, and the brachial stun are all pressure point control tactics designed to impact nerves to try and get people essentially to have numbness in the limb or arm so that we can assert control over them to take them into custody. You'll see that we also categorize canine deployments roughly in that same, if you think of it as a sort of a bandwidth of force options. Also baton strike or deployment of what people think of as less lethal munitions or impact munitions. So 40 millimeter foam baton fired at somebody is tantamount to striking them with a baton, and it's measured that way. Prior to my arrival here in Boise, the lateral vascular neck restraint or the carotid restraint was an authorized technique. It's authorized by the state's post. It's taught by state post. It is a suspended technique. It was suspended prior to my arrival. You'll see that it was a frequently used technique here in the city. What's important, there's a couple of key points that I want to take away from this slide. One is that there are 3 levels at which we measured it. One is simply putting your arm into the position, the application of the technique. The second was actually beginning to apply pressure. That third technique, the gray bar up there, was actually one where there was either unconsciousness or a person began to experience some degree of unconsciousness to the technique. There has not been a negative physical outcome from the application of that technique in the history of the Boise Police Department. Despite that, this technique remains suspended out of public concern for it and out of review of not just the effectiveness of the technique, but the legitimacy of the technique as a police intervention.
Madam Mayor,
Go ahead.
I actually have a question about this technique, Chief Lee. It's my understanding from talking to some BPD officers that say you have an officer who's significantly smaller or than the person they're apprehending, or the person they're apprehending is under the influence of some kind of drug that will kind of change how much strength that they have. It's my understanding that this is actually kind of an equalizer in that scenario. Can you describe that a little bit?
So any technique that interferes with the blood flow to the brain is going to essentially render somebody, once you actually remove the blood flow, and again, this technique is about minimizing blood flow, not about minimizing airflow. Takes about 6 seconds on the average person before they begin to experience a lightheaded sensation and unconsciousness. So you can imagine that if you were substantially outsized in a physical confrontation, this could be a very effective technique from a pure technical, does it work standpoint. But when we begin to look at risk assessment, number of training hours, perceived legitimacy of the technique, how we view this technique, if it was to be applied to an officer, and looking at parity in our use of force versus how we perceive the public using force, there are many challenges to continuing to use this technique, if that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, just to continue along this same topic, are there individuals who might have medical conditions like blood clots, that sort of thing, where this type of procedure could be particularly harmful?
There is always a risk if somebody were to have weak blood vessels. There is a risk factor to it. That's part of the calculation as to whether or not this is an appropriate technique to be using. Those risk factors are not always known to us, although in the general public, you'll see this technique applied in various different sports, judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You see techniques like this applied frequently. There's a large degree of safety. However, there is the unknown variable. That is a large part of why this technique is suspended by the Boise Police Department, but the information is here, and I think it's fair, given public concern about this technique, to present the information in this venue.
Thank you, Chief.
One last follow-up, if I could. Chief, on the lateral vascular neck restraint, I've heard from medical personnel, not in Boise, other places where this is used not with the same careful application as it appears to have been used here, even when it was allowed, that it has been known to cause brain damage in some of the suspects. Is that one of the dangers that you're concerned about in continuing to suspend it?
There's a multitude of medical dangers. I mean, by way of disclosure, I'm not a medical professional, so I'm relying upon the research there. But again, I think anytime we're interfering with blood flow for an individual, there are some serious concerns about the potential for that. Trying to speed along here so I can keep us relatively on time here. Incidents by use of force here and by year, some comparison numbers for you. Again, in less than 1% of our instances involve uses of force. Every incident, again, where force is used is reviewed by a supervisor. And during that time, that 5-year window, there were no uses of force that were found to be outside of policy as it existed at the time when the force was applied. There is a question here that comes up, and I alluded to that there was a critical incident task force. In that 5-year window, there were 11 officer-involved shootings. Again, those are reviewed. They're not necessarily reflective here. They are reviewed by an independent third, for lack of a better description, a third-party agency comes in and reviews our use of deadly force in those situations. So I think that this is really to sort of paint a better picture. These are peer cities that compare. So Reno, Nevada, Greensboro, North Carolina, and Spokane, Washington. I've highlighted in yellow just for the purposes of sort of driving this home. You can see at the top incidents, numbers of use of force relative to the incident, and the rough percentage in various different years that we were able to get data from those peer cities. 1 in 193 incidences is how often force occurs for Spokane, 1 in 1,128 in Greensboro, 1 in 539 in Reno. And I'll drive that point home. 1 in every 539 contacts in Reno ends in a force event. The definitions for these cities are near identical to ours. However, in the city of Boise, you have force being used in 2019 once in every 1,378 calls for service. So we have a markedly lower use of force than even our peer cities, and you can see that it statistically comes out to less than 0.1% of our encounters. We actually wind up using force here in the city of Boise.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, so the comparison with the other cities, is that population size and or racial and ethnic makeup as well?
Those are peer cities as they were selected by the peer city evaluation recommended by the city of Boise to us. They are roughly comparable in size. They have varying mixes of demographics, but statistically fairly similar cities for us to compare to. And it's always a challenge because each city is unique in its composition, its makeup, but they are viewed as comparable cities for us, not just for police related issues, but for almost any other metric as well. So lastly, what I'd like to point out is that right now, the way force is recorded and captured in police reports, it's recorded in basically a narrative type function. So to extract the data, to understand what force techniques were applied, how frequently, it's a very labor intensive process. One of the things that we want to be able to do in Boise, for lack of a better description, is have a section of that force report that is more box check like, so that the extraction of that data is faster and cleaner, and we can get the information quicker. We can present it both publicly as well as internally, analyze it faster. We need to create some systems to be able to extract that information from police reports, because right now the extraction tool we have is manually reading the report, recording what it is into a database. In this day and age, we can automate that, get that information quicker, faster. There's still a need for a narrative that explains the why, but the information about force, we can make that a faster process. That's something we need to do from a data transparency standpoint for the city. As part of that transparency piece, it would be very easy once we've built that bridge to start to extract that data, to be able to put out dashboards so we can share the information quickly internally, but more importantly, quickly externally with the public, so the public can actually see how often is force being used, types of events, other demographic information about force as well.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Halliburton.
Thank you, Chief Lee. Just a question about that last part. How do you envision that transparency or that access looking? Is that something where you would envision the public being able to go to BPD's website and have that information available? How do you see that information being published?
Thank you, Council Member. To be very blunt, yes, either on BPD's website or a city website or a conjunction of the two, so because people look various different places in the information age. There should be a link. You should be able to go to it as fast as we can ensure that the reports and information are accurate. This, amongst a variety of other data, would be openly available in a dashboard where they could see that information. Obviously, for certain types of events, not necessarily for force, but other types of events that would correlate with that, there would need to be some degree of aggregation of data so that, say, for example, you want to look up burglary information. We're not particularly pointing out a specific home in that transparency piece, but you could look at what neighborhoods in general are being affected by burglary, if that makes sense.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
And then lastly, are there any other questions or any other information related to our use of force that I can help enlighten council on?
Madam Mayor. One, more of an observation, I suppose. It's something that came up earlier in your presentation that we trigger a use of force report based on various things. An officer self-reporting that they've used force, a colleague reporting they've used force, or a detainee or arrestee who reports that they've been injured. And if we're in the beginning of collecting data and publicizing it to a dashboard, I wonder if we can think a little bit about that. Somebody who reports that they're injured may not have received force, and the point of tracking force is to track the force, not that it caused an injury. So those are really, we're trying to get at use of force, which doesn't necessarily have to do with injury, by arrestees self-reporting injuries. We care about that. We want to know exactly how many people who are injured during an encounter with a Boise police officer, but that doesn't mean that they've been the recipient of use of force. And so I would encourage you to think about, as you're framing your checkboxes and how to parse this data, a way that would allow us and the public to intelligently look at that and and be able to determine what actually was a use of force versus lots of other things that may inadvertently be swept in.
No, I appreciate that point, council member. And that's part of why we want a system that's faster rather than a manual read, because we could delineate those categories much easier through a system that allowed us, for lack of a better description, envision your college days in the Scantron. If something captured that immediate block, and then we could do deeper analysis in the narrative for things that flagged, it's much faster and a cleaner data capture.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Chief Lee. Along those same lines, one of the criticisms that we've heard of police forces around the country is that there's an outsized number of stops of people of color. Will that be one of the data points that you're measuring in those stop reports?
It is. Part of the challenge that we have with that particular subject is that in the state of Idaho, there's no requirement for doing stop data collection. So we'll use the traffic stop as an example. There is no information that's captured as to why the stop occurred, where did it occur. There's no, what was the perceived information before the stop, what was known after the stop. More importantly, if you were to receive a traffic citation tonight, I hope that doesn't happen, but if you were to receive a traffic citation tonight, there is no block, even on the citation itself, to record a perceived race. And so even for us to go back historically and glean that data, it's not there. Part of, when I talk about having to build data capture mechanisms, it's literally, we have to build a mask that's tied into the computer-aided dispatching system, which is controlled by Ada County, that will then populate whenever Boise police engage in what's a stop. So we have the lawful right to restrict movement, and then would have a variety of pull down tabs so that we can meaningfully get that information. But to your point, we want to be able to look at, are we outsized and inappropriately contacting communities of color? Are we using force disproportionately to any of those communities? And if they are, is there a deeper dive of information that helps explain, is this a data skew? Is this an anomaly? Is this a practice? But we've got to build those bridges to capture that information to start. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thanks so much for joining us. All right, now we will move into the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I first have an item to pull from the consent agenda for future consideration, and that's SOS 20-00025 Moderna Design and Build, 2616 North Harrison Hills Drive.
Would you like to make a motion to pass the consent agenda without that included?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, accepting SOS 20-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
thanks. If I could, I made a comment earlier that we were going to reconsider a motion or a resolution that we passed last week. I've since found out that that was not the resolution that a person intended to have pulled in the first place. So there's no need to do that. I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Great, thanks.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And the measure that you pulled will come back to us at a different time?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, now we'll move into, I believe, subdivision, since Cody's standing here. I haven't gotten through my pages yet. Oh, no, readings.
Madam Mayor, just briefly, that item we pulled from consent, I was hoping we could just touch on it briefly tonight before
Oh,
we
sure.
went into the other.
Yeah. But not right now? Did we just do consent? Oh, you want to wait until the regular subdivision section? Oh, great, okay. All right. So we'll move into ordinances. There's nothing on first reading, but on second reading, we have quite a few.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection?
ORD 25-20, an ordinance amending Title IX, Chapter 2, Development Impact Fee, Section 12B, Boise City Code. This amendment updates the development impact fees for service unit and providing an effective date of October 1, 2020. ORD 26-20, an ordinance amending Title II, Chapter 4, Section 3, Boise City Code, Planning and Zoning Commission, membership, appointment, terms, vacancies, and providing an effective date. ORD 27-20, an ordinance amending Title II, Chapter 6, Section 2, Boise City Code, Public Works Commission, membership, appointment, terms, vacancies, and providing an effective date. ORD 28-20, an ordinance amending Boise City Code, Title I, Chapter 9, by repealing Section 5, Special City Question Elections, and providing an effective date. ORD 29-20, an ordinance CAR 20-00002 for property located at 8306 West State Street, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in Section 1 of this ordinance from single-family residential large lot R-1A to multifamily residential with design review R-3D, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Thank you. So there's nothing on third reading, and the first, second, and third reading ordinance listed here has been pulled or rescheduled for September 1st. So we'll move into subdivisions. Cody, do you first want to touch base on the Moderna?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor,
Great.
Members of council.
And just for clarification, are you bringing this up now for an explanation so that action can be taken?
Madam Mayor, that's correct. We received a late letter of opposition. This was inadvertently on the consent agenda, and so I just would like to address that.
Great, okay.
Thank you. So Madam Mayor, members of council, this item briefly is a request to vacate 5 feet of a 20-foot landscape buffer on the corner of Highland View and Harrison Hills Drive. Normally, this would certainly be a concern from a staff perspective. The intent of this easement is to provide buffering from Highland View, which is a collector roadway. But in this case, the combination of excess right-of-way and ACHD slope easement results in a setback of anywhere between 35 and 50 feet from the edge of paving to the proposed new home. That exceeds the 15 feet we typically see in most of these instances. I would also note that most of the existing trees along Highland View will actually be retained. So I believe the letter in your packet suggested this might be or might have referenced this as a variance. That's not the case. All setbacks will be met. And again, the combination of existing landscaping, the slope, and then just substantial spatial separation will really make that change from 20 feet to 15 feet almost undetectable in from our perspective. And so with that, we are recommending approval of the partial vacation of this easement this evening. Thank you.
So,
And Madam
because
Mayor,
now we're in the subdivision portion and not in the consent agenda portion,
we
I'm
might
going to
check
ask if the
yes.
applicant is, imagine the applicant's not in the room. Nope. Is the applicant on Zoom? Will the record please reflect the applicant is not with us tonight? And then finally, anyone here to testify on Zoom? We'll record the letter of opposition that was submitted as part of the record, but with Cody's explanation. All right, with that, I'll close the hearing.
Madam Mayor,
Madam Mayor, could I ask Cody,
Oh, sure, sorry.
was the tone of the opposition in the letter, was there any relevant information in that? If I missed it, I'm sorry.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I think it was essentially a concern of the aesthetic impacts along Highland View. And again, if this was flat, void of any vegetation, we would certainly be concerned. But again, the majority of those trees will be retained and will actually have more of a setback than we typically would have in a corner situation like this.
Thank you.
All right, if nothing further, we'll close the hearing.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
I move approval of SOS 20-25 Moderna Design and Build 2616 North Harrison Hills Drive. Request to vacate a portion of the required non-buildable landscape buffer along Highland View Drive.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Madam Mayor, one moment.
Oh.
One comment before that. We did get this correspondence from two neighbors, and they took the time to write us, and the applicant's not here, so I just speak to or address their concerns directly. I did look at this material. I looked at the setbacks. I looked at the distance. I looked at Cody's comments about maintaining the space that we're going to have, and I did look at your comments about the expectations that the purchasers of these lot had when they bought it, that they knew what they were getting and now they want to change it, and that doesn't seem fair, and I understand that perspective. But we also have to look at the totality and the wholeness of the situation. The setbacks here are not materially going to change. The purpose of the setbacks is to maintain a buffer, and we're going to accomplish that here. And we do want to work with people to be able to use their property in ways that give them joy and happiness. And so in this case, I just wanted to acknowledge that we received your correspondence and read it and thought about it, and I hear you, but I am going to be voting to approve the adjustment to the setbacks.
Thank you.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up. Okay, so now I'm going to say a couple things about these next ones because we have applicants of record. So for the subdivisions, Ben Semple is on Zoom. That's right. And then Matt Smith. Oh, great, you're here. All right, so what we're going to do with these is Cody will go first, then the applicant, one's on Zoom, one's here. And then what I'll do, I imagine also that you're not here to testify on subdivisions, but I'll ask anybody that's in the room will testify first, and then I'll move into working Jamie, the clerk, to call people up on Zoom. But for people that are waiting on Zoom, we'll get you queued up. If there's neighborhood associations, et cetera, we'll just queue you up so that you're ready. All right, great. With that, go ahead, Cody.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Sorry to throw you for a loop there this evening. We're all still evolving with this constantly changing technology. This item is a request for preliminary and final plat approval of a subdivision with 6 buildable lots on about 3/4 of an acre in an R1C or single family residential zone. The property is addressed at 5716 North Pierce Park Lane. For those unfamiliar with the area, it's on the east side of Pierce Park, about 1/3 of a mile south of Hill Road. Again, the project includes 6 buildable lots, each intended for detached single-family homes. The density of the project is just under 8 units an acre, which is allowed in the zone. The site will be accessed from a 27-foot wide private street. Public street wasn't really feasible in this instance, given the width of the parcel and the lack of available offset from Saxton to the south. As you can see in the image here, If the golf course adjacent to the site were to redevelop, connectivity would likely be served by an extension of Hammermill Drive. Consistent with existing facilities in the area, curb, gutter, and attached sidewalk will be provided along Pierce Park. And within the project itself, given the limited width, the applicant is proposing 5-foot attached sidewalk on the south side of the street, and then the north side will be available for curbside parking. I would also note that the applicant agreed to a blanket public access easement to and along the Spoils Bank Canal. That will definitely help in our efforts to extend a pass system along canals and drains throughout the city. As indicated in your packet, the commission did hear this item along with the conditional use permit back in July. There was no opposition from the public or commenting agencies at that time. They did debate the appropriateness of smaller lot sizes a bit, but ultimately approved the conditional use permit and recommended approval of the subdivision. That conditional use permit was not appealed, so it is only the subdivision before you this evening. We are recommending approval of the preliminary and final plat. Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. I heard somebody, was that Councilmember Halliburton?
Councilmember Halliburton, that's right. Cody, I thought I was going to have to ask you like a bunch of series of canal questions tonight, but it's outlined in almost every single one of your summaries, so I really appreciate that. I do still have a question about the canal because we were recently in a public meeting. Am I coming through all right? I feel like I'm kind of jumpy.
Jimmy, you are a little, ooh, and now I'm echoing. It might be good to just
turn the video off.
Yeah, just turn the video off for this one. We know you're there.
All right. Sorry about that. So Cody, we recently had some conversations with one of the irrigation districts, and they were talking about one of their largest issues of trees falling into the canal, maintenance issues there. And then I was also having some conversations with Steve Burgos about the importance of trying to shade the canals just to prevent operations. So I guess I just had some questions as far as like trees there, if there's anything that we can do to be specifically trying to plant trees that may have a negative effect on the canal while also providing some shade. That's the only input that I have. Other than that, I really appreciate everything that you addressed in the summary.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I think I caught the question there, and it was just the presence of trees or proposed landscaping along the canal. The landscape plan we see on the screen does include 3 of the larger shade trees that would provide shade along the canal, you know, as it relates in terms of water temperature. This was the plan that was transmitted to the irrigation district, and so they did have an opportunity to see this.
Great, thank you, Cody. And I guess just kind of like looking forward, when we do make these efforts to shade the canal, if the irrigation district
Councilmember, you broke up in that last sentence or two that you made. And I'm wondering if you'll just try one more time so it's on the record. And otherwise, I don't think that chat is enabled, but try so that we've got a record of it and we can see what you're trying to say.
Sure, I'll try one more time for see if it works. Just looking in the future, when we're talking with the irrigation districts, if we have a way of helping them out by ensuring that the shade trees along the canals are maybe of a species that is not going to fall, or that will fall a minimal amount of branches, so that we're sort of building some relationships with them there in the types of trees that we're planting.
Great, thanks. We got you that time. Any other questions for Cody? So I have on here that Ben Semple is the applicant listed. Ben, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hey there, nice to see you.
Good to see you too. Madam Mayor, Ben Semple, 1014 South LaPointe Street, Boise, Idaho 83706. Yeah, so Cody did a really great job explaining the project. We're really excited about this smaller infill. We think it brings another housing type to this area. While they are smaller lots, they do include at least 2 bedroom, 1 bath, and a nice backyard associated with them. And then to touch on Councilmember Halliburton's statement, I have been in extensive conversations, not only with the irrigation district, but there's a drainage district that uses this as well for stormwater management. And there's about 60 inches plus or minus of trees that I inventoried on the site personally that we are keeping along the bank of the canal. We are not proposing to remove any trees from within the easement. They did have a bit of a concern about adding additional trees within that easement, but with the amount of cover, I mean, it's basically fully shaded when all the trees are leafed out. There's a variety of cottonwoods, willows, probably a little bit of alder in there as well. So we do intend on maintaining that so that it does protect that waterway. And we are not proposing to tile that canal either. We'd like to leave it open as an amenity. And there is a pathway on the other side of the canal that's associated with the golf course. I don't know if it's technically a pathway, but it's definitely a road on that side. So really, we're excited about the project. We're removing a couple trees from the site itself, but we are adding trees along the frontage of Pierce Park as well as interior to the site. We have about 37.5 caliper inches going into the site, as well as a retention of at least 60 inches of trees, while we're removing 42 inches of trees that fall right against foundations of existing homes that need to be taken down, or buildings that are coming down, a couple outbuildings as well. And really just excited about it. So I would stand for questions.
Madam Mayor?
Is that Councilmember Thompson?
It was. Thanks. Hey, Ben, I'm trying to make sure I understand this access point to the Spoil Banks Canal. Is it the sidewalk and then it just accesses that bank basically and you're at the canal, or is it something else?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, that's correct. The sidewalk goes into, essentially we'll have an open space back in there that allows people to get near the water. It's a active canal, so we're not fencing it. The canal district and the drainage district has not requested that we fence it at all. There is an ACHD drainage facility immediately to the north adjacent of this property, and the canal district accesses through their drainage facility and then does come down the bank of the canal to do maintenance along their canal on this side, removing tree limbs, some stuff like that, which we do intend on helping them with during the development by pruning some of those trees to try to mitigate some of the issues they have with branches falling in the water and things to that effect.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Ben. It's good to see you. I thank you for doing the work to measure the trees on site. It looks to me, as I'm looking at this, that a number of the trees that you will be removing are actually not deciduous trees, but conifers. Am I looking at that correctly?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Clegg, you're correct. There's I guess an 18-inch pine that's about 3 feet from the foundation of a garage that has to be taken down. Obviously that's not going to make it. And I believe there's some other smaller evergreens. They're really shrubs that have gotten to an overgrown state, but nothing of real consequence on the site. There is one plum that's about half dead. So we really feel like while there is a little bit of removal, it's very inconsequential to the project, and really the addition of the beneficial varieties that we're going to be adding, not only to the public or common area spaces, but within the private lots, is going to really improve this site.
Thank you. So one last question then. The trees that you're going to place along the northern property line, are those, I was trying to read the landscape those are class 2 trees that will grow to a large size.
Madam Mayor, Council Member Clegg, yes, you are correct. Those are class 2 trees within the landscape buffer along there. So they
Thank-
will get a very nice size.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, with that, it looks as though nobody's signed up to testify. Nobody's here in the room. I want to do one more check to make sure nobody's online. Okay. We will go ahead and close this matter.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of SUB 20-18 Green Bank subdivision, 5716 North Pierce Park Lane, preliminary and final plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 1 common and 6 buildable lots on 0.76 acres in an R1C zone.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the Culver subdivision, SUB 20-16. Cody.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. We're actually just moving slightly up Pierce Park Road for this subdivision. It's a request for preliminary plat for a residential subdivision, again, with 10 buildable lots on 2.8 acres. It's located on the east side of Pierce Park, only about a 10th mile south of Hill Road in an R1B or single-family residential zone. Each of the 10 buildable lots will be occupied by detached single-family homes. The site will be accessed by a 28-foot wide private street with attached sidewalk on both sides. A curb gutter and attached sidewalk will be extended to match that already exists on Pierce Park. This is really a nice design, as you can see, that all of the homes along Pierce Park will be rear loaded with shared service drive. All required parking will be provided and perimeter setbacks met. There's really no additional opportunity for street connectivity with this project. However, much like the last one, there is an opportunity for future pedestrian connectivity along the Farmers Union Canal to the east. The applicant has agreed to a condition requiring public access to and along that canal. Their plan is to install a gate initially, but they have agreed to a condition that it be removed if and when we can work out an agreement with the irrigation district. The project will require the removal of 7 healthy trees, or about 89 caliper inches. But they're planting 12 new trees in common lots, 2 to 3 new trees per residential lot for a total of 93 caliper inches. And they have agreed to a condition requiring 2.5-inch caliper trees as opposed to the code minimum 2-inch trees. I believe that does touch on the highlights. As indicated in the packet, the commission did recommend approval of this subdivision, and we remain unaware of opposition or concern from public agencies. So we are recommending approval of the preliminary plat this evening.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Cody? Looks like this one's pretty straightforward. Ben, are you in agreement with the report? Anything additional you need to add?
Madam Mayor, Ben Semple, 1014 South LaPointe Street, Suite 3, Boise, Idaho 83706. We are in agreement with all the conditions of approval in the staff report. I do want to add that we are additionally to the 93 inches that we're adding to the site, we're also retaining 177 caliper inches of existing trees on the site as well. And again, really look forward to this project. I feel really great about this one, as well as working with the city to provide that connection to the canal pathway, hopefully that goes in there in the future. It's a really great amenity for this area, not only this development, but the people that live to the west of Pierce Park and the neighborhoods there, to be able to create that connectivity for some walking paths and some recreation opportunities. I would stand for questions.
Looks like you're good. And with that, nobody was recorded as signing up. I'll do a double check. All right, the record will reflect nobody else was here to testify. We'll close the hearing.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of SUB 20-16 Culver subdivision, 6016 North Pierce Park Lane, preliminary plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 10 buildable and 5 common lots on 2.86 acres in an R1B zone.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor, could I make a quick comment? I
Of
just
course.
wanted to say that, oh gosh, 12 years ago, Boise State helped with a study on some infill developments, one of which was on Pierce Park, and identified that there were a number of other opportunities for these very small infill developments along Pierce Park. And it's really great to finally see a couple of them coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, see you later, Ben.
Hi, thank you.
All right, next up, we have the Shire or Shear? Shire subdivision, SUB 20-15. And in the first, for quite a while, we have the applicant with us here. So we'll have you come right up here. There's hand sanitizer, computer if you need slides, etc. Cody will go first, and then oh yeah, you're welcome to stay there and be comfortable, or come up here, whatever you want. I just want to let you know that there's stuff here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This is a request for a preliminary and final plat for a residential subdivision that includes 2 buildable lots and about 1/3 of an acre. The project is located on Sunset Avenue, just west of 36th Street, again in an R1C or single family residential zone. The commission heard this item back in July along with the conditional use permit. That permit was not appealed, so it is only the subdivision before you this evening. That conditional use permit simply allowed the western lot in the subdivision to be reduced from 50 to 43 feet. All of the perimeter and internal setbacks will be met and parking provided. The intent is to retain an existing home on the eastern lot and construct a new one on the lot to the west. Each will be accessed from their own driveway. I would note that we'll often look for shared driveways in situations like this. However, the separate drives actually allow for the preservation of a mature catalpa tree in the front of one of the lots. And because of that, we did support the design, and the commission ultimately approved that through the conditional use permit. While we remain unaware of opposition to the request, I believe the applicant would further like to discuss a request to waive the requirement for sidewalk in front of the subdivision. It was kind of the main discussion point in front of the commission. Our default position, as you well know, is always to get improvements with new projects. And given the lack of curb and gutter in the area, we did support, and the commission granted a waiver from that requirement with this project. However, we still believe, and the commission believed, there was merit to requiring sidewalk with this subdivision. We acknowledge it's always an odd situation with gaps in the network, but ultimately, if we don't get this sort of improvement with new development, it's often a stretch to get it later. So again, we believe the applicant will touch on this a bit this evening. We are recommending approval of the preliminary and final plat, but after hearing from the applicant, we would ask that council specifically address the requested sidewalk waiver in any motion. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, question for you. Cody, I was wondering, in some of these other projects, I know in the past, whether we approved the sidewalk or not, sometimes the concern of runoff was existent to the 2 surrounding neighbors. When there is a sidewalk added, that it can create runoff to the 2 side neighbors. Can you speak to that with this project?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, that's typically more of an occurrence with when we have curb and gutter that doesn't end or connect to other facilities appropriately. In this case, the sidewalk would be detached with a bit of a shoulder to handle that drainage. So it's really just you'd have that awkward in between time where you have a sidewalk that dead ends at each side of the project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, come on up. If you'll read your name and address into the record, we'd appreciate it. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Samantha Smith. This is my husband, Matt Smith.
Ms. Smith, I'm going to ask you Yeah.
Is that
just-
better?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
better.
way
Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm Samantha Smith. This is my husband, Matt Smith. Our address is 3622 West Sunset Avenue, Boise 83703.
Thanks.
So we do have some concerns regarding the requirement to put the sidewalk in. I did want to note that the reason this is considered a subdivision rather than a simple divide was the lot was actually too small for a simple divide. And so that kind of forced us into doing the subdivide. And the planning committee, like Cody said, did waive the curb and gutter because there was some issues with drainage, but did want the sidewalk to go in. And so we wanted to bring up a couple of things that we would like to discuss with that. So I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Sam. So I just wanted to thank you guys for allowing us to be able to be up here. Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. Also, the city planning team did a really good job of helping us through this process. It's kind of a lot for an individual to take on, but they did awesome, and just being able to tell us like what to do and the steps that we had to go through. It's kind of a lot for a subdivide for an individual. So I just wanted to touch upon a couple things really quickly. First of all, I love sidewalks, and I also like bike paths. So I'm in total support of sidewalks and bike paths. In front of our house, I actually also support the idea of a sidewalk in front of our house, except for there's a couple things that I'm a little bit concerned about. Sorry, I'm going to take my glasses off. I can see here. So as mentioned in the report, there were some negative drainage impacts with the sidewalk, but then also, and I didn't know this until after I looked at the report, but apparently to require sidewalks, you would have to subdivide the property. So the properties next to us leading up to the actual edge of the sidewalk where it will be connected. Hopefully, the idea is eventually it'll be connected there. They would have to demolish their homes, subdivide those, and put two existing structures, not just demolish their home and rebuild the house. They'd actually have to divide it. And they're very small. The one in between us is quite small. So that would be, according to the report, extremely unlikely that happens. Let's see here. There was. Oh, and also, so I did had a chance to call ACHD, talk to them about their plan for curb and gutter along the north side of 36, and they said in their 5-year plan they had no plans to actually do that development, nor in their 10 or in anywhere in the future for ACHD. I think that has to do with potentially being, it's not really a major artery. West of 36 is a dead-end street. So they basically said, we're not planning on doing that. Yesterday, I received a call from Joseph Canning at B&A Engineering, and we talked a little bit about this, about the sidewalk, and he had mentioned that basically what's happening for a lot of cases that they're working with are people are building sidewalks, and then when ACHD does road improvements, those sidewalks are tore out and then rebuilt all the way along the street. I called, also had a chance to talk to a concrete company to ask about the cost for the sidewalk, and it came out to be about $11 a square foot. We'd have to build 95 linear feet, and so I think the total cost would be about $8,500 to $10,000 to construct the sidewalk. And my concern is that we would end up constructing a sidewalk and it would never be constructed, and we'd probably watch it be tore out of there and replaced when ACHD decides to build it, or it would just never be connected to the actual infrastructure. So anyways.
I just want to note we have a couple, we love the neighborhood, which is why we're building, because we want to stay in the neighborhood. And we have a couple neighbors that support waiving the sidewalk as well. And I think and one of them wrote a letter of opposition. And I think the main reason was just it doesn't go with the streetscape because there is no sidewalk on that side of the street. And we feel that the goals of sidewalks in cities, we agree that it increases the safety and livability, and realize that the city has this goal of pedestrian connectivity so that it's better for the city overall. But in this particular case, it just seems really unlikely that we'll have that connectivity. So we don't feel that it will accomplish that goal. And we don't feel that it will really increase safety either, because there's a sidewalk on the other side of the street that the children use from Taft Elementary. And so leaving it as a predictable streetscape that it has right now would probably be better. And then lastly, for us, we support the sidewalk. We hope we would support it if it would be connected. But for us, it is a substantial cost to put that in and then have it really not be used or have it be torn out to be replaced at a later date. So I guess those were our biggest concerns.
I guess that also brings up a good question that maybe the city could consider connecting, and then we could just do the connection for our property so that it would be completely connected and you wouldn't have to sort of wait or run the risk of having it torn out. I don't know if that's an option, but yeah, anyways, thanks.
Any questions for is Matt and is it Sam Smith, the applicants?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to commend you two on making it through that process. I have also gone through a similar city process, and I know that at first it's like, this is a little bit daunting. There's a lot of steps here. But congratulations on making it through. I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if we have anyone from ACHD there. I was looking to see, since this is a subdivision and nothing else, I don't see any travel numbers on Sunset, but I'm wondering what the average daily trips are, if we know that.
Cody.
And I know that's an odd question. I ask it because there is a number at which it becomes less meaningful to have a sidewalk on a local street like this, because it's essentially just as easy to walk along it, even on the pavement edge, because there's just not enough traffic for it really to matter.
Is it okay if I say something? I think in the report, ACHD had mentioned that it was like 1 to 2 trips. Could that be possible?
That would be
For the
probably they
How
did
many
the
trips?
for the addition.
per house, like for your addition, it would
Yeah.
be 1 to 2 trips more per day.
Right. Yeah, I think that's all they were just mentioning.
Yeah.
Cody's still looking, but I'm not sure, Elaine, if we're gonna.
Yeah, we probably won't. Madam Mayor, I guess the other thing I would say, if you do end up building the sidewalk, it will be a nice place for your guests to get out of their cars and not be in the mud. I've seen that.
Madam Mayor, I don't see where ACHD provided trip counts for this. Oftentimes with such a small project, they won't.
Yeah. Council President, you hear that?
Yes, I did. And actually that tells me that it's below a certain limit, or they would have provided them. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Liberton.
Yeah. Wait, did you hear me? I said, go ahead, sorry.
Oh,
I talked.
Cody, I was wondering, just looking at that piece of property, if the sidewalk goes in, does that interfere with that catalpa tree at all, or is that far enough out that there's no real issue there? I'm kind of trying to like eyeball where the sidewalk would line up and how it would fit in without, whether there's a buffer there or how it lines up with that tree or any of the other trees that would be in the way.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I think this picture probably shows that catalpa the best. It sits back far enough. There's quite a bit of room for the drip line to be impacted minimally by the sidewalk. But I would acknowledge, like the applicant said, the sidewalk as it exists today terminates clear over at 36th Street. So really to get the connection to the sidewalk, you'd have to have redevelopment of the corner property and then the next property internal to the neighborhood before it would connect with the applicant's property this evening.
Thanks, Cody.
All right. It looks like there are no further questions. Thank you both very much. Thank you. There's nobody that signed up in advance to testify on this. I just want to do a final check. All right, the record will reflect that nobody is on Zoom waiting to testify. With that, I'm going to close the hearing.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of the Shire subdivision, SUB 20-15, Boise City preliminary / final plat at 3622 West Sunset Avenue, with the exception of the site-specific condition of approval for the applicant to construct sidewalk.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Looking at the map, the main concern that I have is that there's a very large parcel to the south that I'm pretty familiar with this street in this little corner of town, just seems likely to be subdivided sometime in the future. And when that happens, there may be a lot of people going up and down this street. But is that going to happen in the next 10 years? You know, I don't know. If we impose the sidewalk condition, are you going to spend 10 years with a janky piece of concrete in front of your house and you're the only one on the street while it sort of deteriorates into the, probably. It doesn't sound like the traffic here justifies needing pedestrian sidewalks on both sides of the street. It sounds like everybody is presently perfectly happy using the south sidewalk on the south side of the street. And it's hard to think of a reason from my perspective, that you should have to pay 10 grand because someday that large lot on the other side of the street might be subdivided. So I'm happy to see that sidewalk requirement removed.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just briefly, I would second that comment and note that, in fact, I've done a lot of work in a lot of communities around the state, and anytime the average daily trip numbers are below 300 to 500 cars a day, and my guess is this street is well below 300, or we would have heard about it from ACHD. It's more than sufficient to have sidewalk either on just one side of the street or even no sidewalk at all. And so with that in mind, it doesn't, as much as I support walking, and you all know that, doesn't make much sense to require this little piece.
Great, thank you. It looks like that's it for comments. So clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great, thank you. We're going to take a quick break, probably 5-ish minutes because we just have one more item on the agenda. It's all of you. And we typically stop every hour and a half. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back and then we'll get started.
Yeah, I just asked basically journal conversion.
I mean, it's really long ADU. So if they in the right situation, that works. But I think it's fun. She recognized that. And it's nothing wrong with photos. Nothing wrong with any of that. Actually, person. I was just, oh. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it was interesting. I'm just trying to get my light through there, but it's usually in the dark. I do. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that ADU thing that I don't know if we'll proceed with something separate. Yeah, maybe there is. I was reading it over and over, and I wondered if property, Reno or they just know about use, but yeah, that's true. I mean, it's attached. Oh yeah. So we'll see. Yeah. Yeah. We got it. It's like a sellout crowd. There is such a thing for it. Nowadays.
Did you still want to say something at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay.
It sounded like it was raining again.
Maybe, yeah. The Dunkley Music Store. Well, I like the last one thing, the Schreier, you know, the Hobbit, you know. an S on the end of your name. I'm in the same boat. So Holmes isn't. Holmes is.
How are you? Good to see you.
We just go with the homies. Right? Short that one. There you go. That works. Yeah.
I think Marissa, are those are like wet wipes, right? No, here, use these instead.
While you're, that's honestly, I leave my phone at my desk, just so it doesn't even cross my mind. Oh, well, it's just small up there.
Well, welcome back. As soon as we're waiting for one more person. Once I can see the council president will, oh, there she is. Great. We will get going. So next up, you good, Cody? Okay. Next up, we have this one, CAR 20-5, SUB 20-9, and PUD 20-13 appeal of that. So for this one, we actually have, for members of the press who can't see, we have many people in the room tonight that are here to testify, all masked and healthily distanced, which we appreciate. And we will start this first with Kevin as our staff presenter. And then, doesn't the appellant go? But it's. You could do it either way because there's. Okay. We're gonna go with, because it's an appeal that, and I know there's another matter before us, but with that traditional process. So the appellant, Marissa, representing SWACA, Marissa Keith will go, and then the applicant, Jim Conger and Heath Clark, you all are on Zoom, yes? Because I don't see you here. Okay, great. We've got either Jim or Heath or both on Zoom. And then after that, we will go, there's a list here of people that have signed up to testify, I believe, on Zoom. So first I'll start with people in the room that have signed up on the piece of paper, and then if anybody else wants to go. And then I'll move into this list that is for Zoom. And then after we go through this list, if anybody else is on Zoom, we'll take them up, and then we'll go to the rebuttals to wrap things up. Sound good, everybody? All right, great. Okay. You're not Kevin.
No, Madam Mayor, just briefly, I thought you needed a break from me for a little while tonight. Kevin Holmes will be presenting. He's been with us for about a year now and doing a tremendous job. And so we thought he deserved a shot at the big leagues and to speak before you this evening. So
Great.
please,
Well, welcome,
I promised him
Kevin.
you'd be gentle.
It's good. It's good to have you. We'll try to be gentle.
Yeah, well, Cody's a tough act to follow, so we'll see where we go. Madam Mayor, members of council, this item before you is a request for an annexation of 19.6 acres located at 9933 and 10151 West Victory Road with an R1B single-family residential zoning and a preliminary plat comprised of 67 buildable lots and 6 common lots. Before you is also an appeal of the associated conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 67 single-family homes, which was approved at the June 8th Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. The property, shown here in red, is located on the southwest corner of the intersection of Victory Road and Mitchell Street in southwest Boise. Property is located within the Boise City area of impact and has a large lot land use designation. Across Victory Road to the north lies neighborhood zoned R1B, and to the east is a smaller neighborhood with an R1A zoning designation. Properties to the south and west remain in Ada County within a state residential zoning. All surrounding properties do consist of single-family residential neighborhoods with varying levels of density. As you can see here, lots to the north generally are in the 7,000 to 10,000 square foot range. To the west are half-acre lots, which then increase in size as you leave areas annexed into the city to the south and west, where properties are generally around an acre or so in size. There are 2 existing homes on the property identified here in orange, which are proposed to be demolished, while the existing home on the southwest corner in green is proposed to remain and be incorporated into the new development. The proposed subdivision is accessed off Mitchell Street with pedestrian and emergency connections out to Victory Road and has a proposed density of 3.61 units per acre, below the 4.8 units per acre allowed in the R1B zone. As you can see on the plat here, smaller lots are proposed along Victory Road and generally increase in size towards the south and west. With the PUD application, the commission approved of reduced dimensional standards similar to those typically associated with an R1C zoning for the majority of the lots, while the 14 homes along the southern boundary are proposed to retain the typical dimensional standards of the R1B zone, except for reduced interior side setbacks of 5 feet should the homes be constructed as 1 story. The commission was supportive of these overall reductions as they provide a transition to the larger existing lots to the south. As you can see in this aerial, the property does have a significant number of mature trees. First, I'd like to point out that the applicant has agreed to a condition to retain the trees along the southern property line to buffer their existing homes from this new development. For the rest of the property, the applicant has provided a tree assessment with a breakdown of how many trees they anticipate retaining, removing, and planting with this development. So to verify these numbers, a condition of approval includes the submittal of an actual tree mitigation plan for review and approval prior to the issuance of any grading permits. The commission added this condition with the intent that at the end of the day, the absolute numbers of healthy trees on the property would either increase or at a bare minimum remain the same. The planning team has received a significant number of comments on this project since it was originally submitted in February. In general, these focused primarily on the density of the proposal not being compatible with surrounding neighborhoods, impacts to local roadways, the effects of on irrigation and drainage facilities, and the preservation of rural open space in the 2 potentially historic buildings. These items were all included in your project packets, and I'm sure you'll hear about them more in depth from those in attendance this evening. The appeal of the plan unit development was submitted by the Southwest Ada County Alliance on 3 grounds shown summarized here. As detailed further in your project packet, the planning team did not find that any of these grounds demonstrated that the commission erred in their decision. Their decision was based on the facts and evidence presented, including existing ordinance standards and adopted plans. Therefore, the planning team is recommending you uphold the original decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve the plan unit development. In conclusion, so there's 3 motions that are needed this evening. So first up is a decision on the annexation that the commission recommended approval on. Second, if that annexation request is approved, a motion on the appeal of the PUD will be needed. So as a reminder on these, if you decide to either modify the conditions of approval or approve the appeal and deny the PUD application, you will have to find that the commission made an error in their decision. Finally, a motion on the subdivision will be needed. The Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend the approval of the preliminary plat as they found it to be in conformance with the Boise City Development Code and Blueprint Boise. Thanks, and I'll stand for any questions.
Are there questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Kevin, great job. I'm curious, and maybe I missed it. I was kind of glancing through here at the same time. What does the pedestrian facility look like on Mitchell Street?
So currently existing, there is none. Excuse me, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Whittings. It's a dirt shoulder, and it is proposed to be improved with detached sidewalks and curb and gutter.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Question for staff. A few weeks ago, I think folks know we had an application where we had asked for some tree mitigation, but we approved the rezone prior to understanding what that mitigation might be. Just from a process standpoint, and this may be legal staff may want to pipe in here. Is it perhaps advisable if we find that there are conditions that need to be met before we understand the full impact of this development, that we actually hold the rezone until we see some answer to that mitigation, rather than approving it and hoping that the mitigation comes?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I can take a stab at that. Certainly approving a rezone without having, if you have concerns about tree mitigation that we can address through these other applications, does open it up to the possibility that certain such as what we've kind of talked about here, getting a 1-for-1 tree trade-off would not be met. On the same note, we have looked at this site and the conditions of the tree and the condition of the site in general, and seeing that it is agricultural land that's a lot of these trees are volunteers and probably not in the best condition, that any sort of subdivision probably would be an improvement on the health of the trees that would be on that site. But you certainly do have a point that it could open that up, something of that nature.
Any follow-up?
Madam Mayor.
No, I'm good.
Oh, following up on the council president's comment, I think the situation, this may not be the question she was asking, but it's the question I have, so I'll ask it. Is there anything that we can do to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we've approved the subdivision with an expectation that a certain number of trees will stay, and then we find out later they don't, and we're stuck with the approved subdivision? Is there any way to invert the order of priorities, condition the subdivision on the trees, or otherwise permit us to be able to come back and revisit this decision if, for example, that row of trees on the south side is lost in the construction process somehow?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent, in terms of this specific subdivision, it is tied to the PUD approval and the subdivision in front of you. So if, for example, you were to approve the rezone, but not the subdivision, and they built something that wasn't in line with what we have here before us, the way to ensure that any sort of condition about trees is met would be through a development agreement associated with the rezone. Hopefully that answers your question.
I think it does. I mean, we're all talking around the situation that we ran a couple of weeks ago, where I think a couple of years ago we had one expectation about how a property would be subdivided, and we attached this squishy condition. We said, and then if possible, do certain things related to trees. And then we heard later, it's not possible. And that created some tension and some difficulties because everybody disagrees about what's possible. And so I think we're all kind of trying to talk around how to not put ourselves in that situation again with respect to these trees.
Sure. And Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent, with this specific, if let's just say, for example, it comes to light that this sort of ratio could not be met, right, that we're looking for. It would require a modification of the PUD agreement, and it would go to the commission again, since that is a site-specific condition in that approval. So there still would be a way to review this through one of our decision-making bodies.
Okay, we'll move. There might be some more questions on that throughout, but we'll move into first the appellant, Marissa Keith. Oh, no. And for everybody that's here, we put some wipes there. If you want to take off your mask, I'd ask that you wipe the mic when you're finished, or both before you start and you finish if you want, but leave it just covered, clean for the next person. I think it's up.
Oh, it is up. It's not up over there. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong screen.
Do you have a TV down here? Can you see it? Is there one in front of us? I can never remember. Okay. All right.
Is this on? Can you hear me?
It is. You're not as, it doesn't sound all that, yeah, just pull it a little closer maybe.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Marissa Keith, 3279 South Cloverdale Road, Boise, Idaho, 83709. I am here as a representative of the Southwest Ada County Alliance Neighborhood Association. You can change the slide. So this is a quote that we often hear. If things go on as they are, Boise stands an excellent chance of becoming the first American city to have deliberately eradicated itself. And that was by L.J. Davis from the 70s when Boise was considering tearing down a number of historic buildings to build a mall downtown. The mall obviously never got built, and since that time, Boise has done a much better job of protecting historic properties in and around the downtown core. However, that same protection does not extend to other areas of town, and especially not to the area of impact. I included a lot of the historical information in the testimony of SWACA, and as well as the letter submitted by Preservation Idaho. So I'll just summarize for the audience. These two houses, one is an octagon, one is a heptagon, were built by twin sisters Elaine Allen and Eileen Schreier in the late 60s and 70s. Schreier family owned and ran the Stagecoach Inn. The houses were built by the three brothers, Art, Noel, and Lyle Cook. And much of the material is native to Idaho. The sisters collected the rocks for some of the walls and the center column from the nearby areas. The sisters were prominent equestrians. They taught photography classes in Sun Valley, and neighbors say that one of the sisters carved carousel horses, which is why the houses are shaped as they are. Some have said that the sisters are not historic figures. And it's true that this family is not made up of prominent government officials, and they were not renowned artists. They were everyday people who contributed to our community, were well known to many, and they are still remembered by a lot of people to this day. So not every historic thing worth saving is owned by historical celebrity. Sometimes it's okay to preserve things because people meant something to the community. Their legacy adds to the character of the neighborhood. And because even everyday people should not be forgotten to time. So there's other arguments that these properties are not historic because they are not old enough. And according to Boise City Code, a house just needs to be 50 years old to be reclassified as historic if they are within a historic district. And obviously this area of town does not enjoy historic district protections. But if we do not preserve older homes now, then SWACA and other parts of town will never have the history that the North End or the East End have. It'll be torn down for the sake of growth, and all we will be left with to remember it by is a plaque and maybe a post once in a while on the Historic Boise Facebook page. So the developer has argued that the houses have structural deficiencies and would be too difficult to bring up to code. According to the Statesman article done this year by Haley Harding, the attorney, Mr. Clark, stated that the houses are not built to current electrical codes or energy standards, making it nearly impossible to save the buildings. So I would like to know what house in the 60s or 70s is up to current electrical codes or doesn't need energy efficiency updates. These are a couple of examples in SWACA where developers have kept the original farmhouses, rehabilitated them, and then sold them. The house on the left is off of Cloverdale near Victory. It was built in 1963 on 5.5 acres. The land was redeveloped as part of Muir Woods, and the developer retained and remodeled the farmhouse and added another 12 houses around it. And the house on the right, built in 1968, was remodeled, and 3 other houses were approved to be built on the 1.22 acres, and this came before City Council last year. Retaining old homes and remodeling them can be done. In this case, it just doesn't want to be done. In this situation where annexation is needed for development, the city has an opportunity to extend historic preservation to an area that lacks any protections at all. This is, as you know, the land use map. I call it the holy grail of Boise Blueprint because it's typically the first and last thing that we see when we talk about developments. So a lot of the argument for smaller lot sizes being included in the large lot area was that it was near or adjacent to the suburban land use category and would provide transition. So this is similar to this map, this large picture that you see here. The developers of Music Subdivision are asking for R1B and have stated that the small lots along Victory provide transition between the 2 land use categories and provide transition to the larger lots on the south. However, the lots across Victory in the suburban land use are between 8,000 and 9,000 square feet. The ones along Victory and Music start at around 5,100. Any transitions should start at 9,000 square feet and go up, not start 2,000 square feet below what is across the street in a different land use category. The neighbors would actually like to see zoning be at R1A with transition lots ranging from 9,000 square feet along Victory up to 20,000 square feet on the south side, which is comparable to the second lot there on the left on the bottom. The next slide, please. So Boise talks a lot about housing choice. People need to have a choice and a variety of housing to live in, but there should also be some predictability about how the adjacent lands will develop when choosing to live in a certain neighborhood. So here we see that only 19 of the 67 lots meet the square footage standards set forth in the R1B zone. And did we skip one? Well, a predictable development pattern is one of the goals of the comprehensive plan. And this is for comparison from different land use categories and recent subdivisions. Savannah, which is over there to the left, that is in the compact land use category, has single family home lots ranging from 5,300 to 6,800 square feet. The Muir Woods edition, which saved that old farmhouse that I showed you earlier in a previous slide, it's in the suburban land use category and it has 3-acre lots. How is 5,000 square foot lots in a large lot area a predictable development pattern for Southwest Boise? So this is our SWACA lot census. Every once in a while we get together and tour our area and see what's being built and what's not. So we have an abundance of new development of small lots in Southwest Boise. And according to our records, this is not official, but according to our records, we have over 5,000 lots that have been approved in the last 4 years, but only a fraction of that has been built. And this particular development or developer has 2 other properties in SWACA with small lots. That's the right next to the Fred Meyers on Overland and 5 Mile, and then 5 Mile in the freeway. What we don't have is newer development that offer large lots to those people who want to choose that. And as we heard at the planning and zoning, the residents of Diamante, which is across the street from Music Subdivision across Mitchell, specifically chose that development because they wanted a larger lot. And most of those lots are around a ½ acre. This is the farmer's lateral. It kind of runs there through Molinar Park and crosses Victory and then crosses Victory again. Dr. Llewellyn from the Northwest NA has spoken a lot about the importance of open laterals, and there is only a small portion of the farmer's lateral that is still daylighted in this block. And you can see it down there in the lower picture with the cows. That is the area that runs through the Dunkley property. The other open area runs behind the 5 Mile greenhouse. SWACA asks that this small area of open lateral remain open to help create microclimates for living things, watering holes for wildlife, preserve the agricultural history of the area, and maintain the rural characteristics of Southwest Boise, which is discussed in depth in Blueprint Boise. As far as transportation goes, if you've not been out to Southwest Boise, particularly the area of impact, recently we have a lot of 2-lane arterials, not a lot of sidewalks, and we have pedestrian crossings at every intersections, which are 1 mile apart. SWACA has been working with our ACHD commissioner for the last few years to increase the amount of bike ped infrastructure. This year, some of the projects were a pedestrian crossing at Seneca and 5 Mile. Lake Hazel Middle School, which opened in 1980, just got sidewalk along the east side of the field so the kids don't have to walk or ride through the mud and weeds to get to school. And we have some temporary intersection ramps going in at Cloverdale and Amity, where before there was just gravel. However, getting that money for community projects last year was like pulling teeth at ACHD. And unfortunately, we only really saw movement after that 7-year-old was hit and killed on Amity and Cloverdale last summer. So this is what the neighbors asked for at ACHD. Our arterials and our collectors, they're long and wide and straight, and increasing traffic and speeding has led to more and more safety concerns. So what we asked for was an installation of a traffic signal at the intersection of Mitchell and Victory, or a protected pedestrian crossing across Victory. A crosswalk painted across Mitchell Street at the intersection to match what is on the other side of the intersection, and then traffic calming on Mitchell. And what we got were the standard sidewalks along Victory and Mitchell, which they require for every subdivision. No parking signs on Mitchell Street, and a striped or a painted northbound turn lane from Mitchell turning on to Victory. So imagine living on one side of Victory and wanting to cross the road to take a walk, go on a family bike ride, or even if your child wants to go visit their friend in the neighborhood next door. To do so more safely at a crosswalk, they would need to travel a mile out of their way rather than walk across the 40 feet of road. Victory is a level of service F road, which means 2 times a day. There's not a break in traffic large enough to safely chance running across that street. I recently watched a webinar with some local transportation people, and one observation really stood out to me. I think I saw some city council members on the same webinar. Don Kostelic said something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing here, motorists don't have to do anything to get their needs met by ACHD. Cyclists and pedestrians must pay attention, write in, call their commissioner, and testify in person, as well as be an expert in the field of transportation if they want any chance to even get the smallest improvements. And that's really the development pattern that we've seen in Southwest Boise. Getting ACHD to improve the bike ped facilities without corresponding road widening has been an uphill battle. This year, there was again debate about what to do with the extra funds since chip sealing didn't occur due to COVID. Sidewalk gaps and pedestrian crossings were not really a priority of most of that agency. So the walking path and pond are great amenities for the subdivision, but they will be privately owned by the HOA. What this area needs is connectivity for all modes of transportation, cars, bikes, wheelchairs, feet, to increase safety and make our area walkable and bikeable for all levels and ages of people, both current and future residents. This is really small, sorry, that's how it was on the website, but in the staff report for music, Victory Road is said to be widened between 2021 and 2025. In the 2020 CIP, which ACHD just adopted last week, it's now projected to be widened between 2036 and 2040. So regardless of your opinion on 5-lane roads, and I know mine has changed since I started this whole thing a few years ago, the continued push out of timelines by ACHD shows that they do not have the ability to make improvements for motorists in a timely manner, let alone bike and pedestrians. As the NA president from day one, I told the residents of this area that this development would likely not be stopped because Boise needs the housing. The landowner has property rights, but that doesn't mean that we need to just accept the first offer. Any new development should bring more than just rooftops and traffic to SWACA. It should truly be an asset, providing both placemaking and placekeeping, preserving history, enhancing character, and adding to the infrastructure that is desperately needed in this area. To sum up, this is what we feel this development should have to make it better. R1A zoning, 9,000 square foot lots along Victory, transitioning to 20,000 square foot lots on the south side. Historical preservation of the twin homes. Condition of approval that this development is limited to 2-story homes. That's a discrepancy in the application paperwork that we want to make sure is settled. Pedestrian crossing at Mitchell and Victory. And we would also like the council to consider having the Right to Farm Act written on the final plat. This is something that Ada County has done in the past, and the lots to the south in this neighborhood, they do participate in ag activities in their pastures back there. So we want to make sure that those people are protected and that the new residents moving in realize that there might be some noises and smells and insects that they will have to deal with that comes along with those activities. So thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Keith?
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So Marissa, I'm curious if there's any plan or has been any discussion about any way to preserve the historic structures rather than just requiring the developer to do that. Not sure, as I understand our code, that we have an ability to do to require that outside of a landmark or historic district.
Did you mean like if there had been any discussion as to like moving the houses? Is that what you're?
Yeah, any discussion among any of the neighbors who would be interested in participating and doing something, yeah, potentially moving them or other.
Not that I am aware. The one interaction I had with the current homeowners of those homes, he did not seem interested in discussing saving those houses. And then to another neighbor, he commented that he would rather see them burned to the ground than stay. So I don't think that's been a priority for that landowner or the developer to look into.
Thank you. Second question on the pedestrian crossing at Mitchell and Victory. I don't necessarily disagree that there needs to be one there, but there's also potentially a proportionate share question for this particular developer. Was there any discussion at ACHD about the cost of doing that and who might be responsible for how much of it?
Again, not that I'm aware. I did speak with the planner at ACHD a couple of times. This did not go before the commission, so we didn't have an opportunity to bring this up to the commissioners. As far as sharing of it, I realized that if we had planned for this, even when Carolina Place, which is the neighborhood north of Victory, went in, and then again when Diamante came in, you know, we would have been in a better position as far as sharing of the facility cost. But this is, I mean, this is a large lot area, and you have to remember that none of this infrastructure was even needed. Even 20 years ago, I would walk from Victory across the freeway to the area where St. Luke's is now and not see a car. Now, like, you don't hardly go get your mail out on Cloverdale because there's so much traffic. So it really things have changed very quickly there, and there's not a great plan for the development of the Southwest. And at this point, somebody needs to pay for it. I don't think ACHD is going to put up the dollars to do it anytime soon. And frankly, developers, they need to start putting a little bit more infrastructure into our area.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like that's it for now. I'm sure there'll be more before the end of the evening. Thank you, Marissa.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
may I ask a question of staff
Yes.
real quick? Thanks, Kevin. One of Marissa's comments was to limit this development to 2-story homes. Can you explain how that is in a R1B zone currently?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, currently in an R1B zone, it's just limited by height, so 35 feet in height. The applicant originally in their very first submission of this application did say 3-story homes, and then later revised that to say 2-story. So that is what the assumption is at this point, that they will be 2-story in height.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton.
Yep.
I've been a council member now for 8 months. Has the city historically, have we done right to farm agreements on properties like this?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I do not believe so, no.
All right, that looks like it might be it for now. Thank you. Okay, next up. Oh, there you are. Hi, Heath.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. You can go ahead and get started.
Oh, I will. And can I steal the screen for a second here for our presentation? Looks like it's still being shared by someone else right now.
Oh, sorry, I'm not answering you. I'm answering you in my head. Of course. But I'm not sure who.
I think maybe Marissa's application. Oh, there we go. Now it's free. There we go. Okay.
Oh, there is just an FYI. I just saw that Ryan Head from ACHD is here. He did a little chat in the chat window, so we can ask questions of ACHD as needed. Hi, Ryan. All right, Heath, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street in Boise, representing the applicant and the Conger Group. We are here to talk about the proposed music community. As has been mentioned, it is a 20-acre project down at Victory Road in Mitchell. It will include not approximately, 67 residential units. The density, and this will come up throughout the night, is 3.6 units per acre. While all required connectivity is provided, I did want to point out here that there is no opportunity to stub this property to neighboring subdivisions. There are no through roads as it exists, and it largely functions independently. That's a function of the vintage of some of the neighboring properties. You can see in this drawing as well the existing pond that will be maintained along with the amenities that will be provided for the project. As Kevin mentioned, the PUD was approved by P&Z and the remaining applications were recommended for approval. And I'll go over some of the highlights of the project. And I want to talk about the theme and some of the amenities. I'm going to focus a lot on the transitioning that has gone into the design. And then I'll provide a few comments regarding trees, because obviously that's going to be something that there's some questions about. And then before I conclude, I'm going to respond to the appeal on the PUD. And just want to be clear that that was focused on some very narrow issues. And so I'll try to keep everybody focused on what was actually cited in the appeal. So starting with the theme, One thing I wanted to point out is that the neighborhood is going to have a distinct look to it. One of our sellers, the Dunkleys, which is where the name of the community comes from, they will be residing here. They will stay in their existing home. And we have based the design on conversations with them about what they would like to see. This design will run with our approvals, and I will note and confirm that there is no 3-story product proposed. That was a typo, no 3-story product. In terms of amenities for the community, there will be 12.9% of the project in landscaped open space. Common area open space will use drought tolerant plantings and water conserving sprinkler designs. We will use an MP rotator sprinkler head that saves 30 to 40% on water use. And a major element of that is going to be preservation of the existing ponds. We are in agreement with staff's condition and will add a path on the west and south side of the pond as well. And that area will also include the shade structure and the climbing boulders that are proposed. So let's talk about transition. As you know, infill is always a challenge. In this case, we're dealing with older subdivisions on the south, more recent subdivisions on the north, and a project that is located on the edge of 2 comprehensive land use areas where we transition from large lot to suburban. So you can see that we have our largest lots on the south. They're oriented with the goal of trying to align lot lines where possible, and we were able to get that ratio to about 1.5 to 1. The choice of zoning is part of the overall transition plan. Let me tell you what I mean. As staff has mentioned, R1B is a permitted zone within the large lot designation. It matches the zoning of the neighborhood to our north. And we're also talking about property that's on a significant transportation corridor, which is Victory Road. The density, which is well within the R1B zone, is appropriate, and we think it's consistent with the area. But let's talk about some of the specifics that are unique to this. The project to the south is an older subdivision from the late 1960s, and we've given that transition a lot of thought, as you can see from the layouts on the prior screen. But in addition, there's existing circumstances that help to buffer any impact. First, there is the row of trees, which you can see in this picture, which we're going to maintain. So that creates a visual and sound buffer. Second, as you can see from this picture, the homes are set significantly away from that southern boundary. There's about 175 feet from our southern boundary to any of those homes. Some of the homes have 2-story shops built in the back of the parcels. But I want to point out that the zoning on that side is RUT in Ada County, which means that they have a 25-foot rear setback. Ours is larger with a 30-foot setback from the rear property line. So we think we've done a good job of transitioning from the existing county RUT subdivision into a city of Boise subdivision that meets the city's goals for development along transportation corridors. So let's talk a little bit about trees. With regard to trees, this is important to us. It's important to our sellers. Since Planning and Zoning Commission, we have worked with an arborist. That report is in your manual, or excuse me, in your project report. At this time, it appears that we're going to be able to maintain more than 200 trees on site. So when we talk about caliper inches, you're not usually talking in the range of hundreds of trees here. So it's hard to measure it on that fine of a scale. But we have reviewed all of this with our arborist, and they've identified specifically 200 trees that can be preserved. Those include trees on the southern boundary and around the pond. Now, as you know, many trees have a definite lifespan. As Kevin mentioned, there's a significant number of trees at the project that are not healthy. Many of them are volunteers. A lot of them have been munched on by the grazing animals that have been on the site. So the way we see it is that we will be planting, in addition to preserving 200 trees, we will be planting 300 additional trees that will have, they will all be at the beginning of their life cycle. They will all be healthy. They will all be maintained. And so we think that this is going to end up with a net improvement. We are going above and beyond the standards that are in your code. So for example, on Victory Road with the landscape buffer up there, if 47 trees are required by code, we're going to do 80. In the end, we are going to have about 25 trees per acre and build out. Retaining those trees is important to us, and staff, given the lack of direction that's in code on this issue, they've thoughtfully worked with us. We have done a report again. It tells everyone how many trees can be preserved. It identifies them by type of trees and by location. Given all that information, I think that it is possible to do what Kevin has mentioned, which is the 1-to-1 ratio of healthy trees being preserved or replaced. And I believe with the information that's been provided in that report, that the condition that staff has proposed, which is that we come and prove it up at grading permit, is appropriate and it is specific enough to be enforceable as a condition of approval. I don't believe that there's anything additional that would be required for the city to impose on those lines. So let's talk a little bit about some of the concerns that we saw at planning and zoning. Two items that stood out at that point were transportation and traffic, and then this question of retaining the two homes that have been discussed. So with regard to traffic, ACHD has reviewed and approved the project. I think it's important to point out that ACHD took an unusual step, and they included a special section in their report that responded to the neighbor questions. Some of the questions that were brought up tonight in particular were studied by ACHD, and there was a second bite at the apple at that included in the report. So one of those items that I would point to was the question of the PED crossings at Mitchell. And the report specifically says that there is not a warrant for those PED crossings at this time. And as you know, that's how ACHD bases whether those PED crossings could be installed. ACHD did commit in the report to continue to monitor that situation. And given that that's at a mid-mile on an arterial, that sure sounds like a system improvement that could be funded at a later date if it ever is warranted. In addition, and I want to stress this, we have not proposed an approach on Victory that minimizes the number of entrances onto the arterial, but we will install the left turn lane at Mitchell, and we will dedicate the right of way, which is all of the mitigation that ACHD identified in their report. So let's talk about the retention of the homes. So we've had a number of conversations with the current owners. Again, the Dunkleys are going to remain. They're going to stay in their home. So we are just talking about the two up near Victory Road. Those homes are unique. There's no question about that. They are not historic, and we are not able to retain them for sale to third parties. They are not built to current energy or electrical codes, but what Ms. Keith left out from my comments is that there are also documented structural deficiencies in each of them. These are built in a very, I'd put it, idiosyncratic manner. I'll just put it this way. I don't think that you would be able to get a home inspector to give it a positive report. I don't think that you could get financing as a result of that. But as we've looked at it, one of them already has steel supports on the inside to try to address some of these issues, because really these are masonry homes that were built over time with rock, and in a way that just does not conform to any sort of a building code. Now that said, we recognize that there should be a record of these homes, and that history should be respected and honored. And so After discussions with the current owner, one of the things we are going to do is we're going to include an interpretive plaque on the pond pathway that'll honor that history. And then second, and we've been discussing this with Kevin, and we are in agreement with this, that we will make the homes available for SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, to come tour, to take pictures, to document. They will not be lost to the dustbin of history. They will be properly documented. So with that, I'd like to turn to the PUD appeal points, address those, and then I'll wrap up. Now, I want to just stress as I begin that we do believe that the PUD.
You're not keeping time. You've got 3 minutes left.
Okay, I'll finish up quickly. Thank you. I just want to emphasize that we do believe that the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision was correct, that the appellants bear the burden on this and that they have not carried it. So their first claim is that there's incompatibility with the existing neighborhood. So you have to look at what the existing and the evidence in the record shows. And again, this is property located on a major transportation corridor, Victory Road, at the boundary of the large lot and subdivision land use areas. R1B is a permitted zone in this area. It is appropriate given this location. Now, the appeal seems to be focused on the use of the PUD, but I just really want to emphasize that PUD permits preservation of the pond and the trail areas while still staying within the allowed densities in the R1B zone. And I'd point you to Commissioner Stevens' commentary before the P&Z, where she talked about the alternative being a more gridded out subdivision without these unique factors. We've gone to great lengths to make sure the lots are thoughtfully transitioned, and we've retained the trees along the southern boundary. The evidence shows that the location is compatible to other uses in the neighborhood. Second claim was that there's an alleged adverse effect on the neighboring properties due to a claimed drainage issue. The long-term owners here are not aware of any such issue on the property, and the issue that SWACA pointed to is actually upstream. But to be clear, grading and drainage, those are reviewed and approved by Boise City, and the irrigation system will be approved by Nampa Meridian Irrigation District. That is standard operating procedure. Next, the question of alleged noncompliance with Blueprint Boise. Again, keep in mind that a PUD does not allow higher densities. It just allows for modified setbacks and lot sizes. This is no additional traffic impact because there are no additional lots as a result. The R1B allows a density up to 4.8 units per acre. Again, we're only proposing 3.6. ACHD's reviewed the project, reviewed the traffic impacts, and even took time to do a special response to the neighbors. Each of those concerns were carefully dealt with. We agree with P&Z and believe that the evidence in the record shows that P&Z was justified. In short, I just want to remind council of the standard here. When there is room for two options, action is not arbitrary and capricious when exercised honestly and upon due consideration. P&Z did his job. This is not a burden that the appellant has carried here, and the PUD approval should be upheld. So with that, in my last 5 seconds, I'll just remind everyone with a couple of points that this is infill, but it's tough. It's hard to do it right. We have provided a variety of housing types with a unique PUD setup that allows preservation of the pond. All relevant agencies have reviewed and approved, and we are in agreement with all of the staff conditions. We are not requesting any modifications to those conditions. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Heath?
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Heath, is the pond that's being preserved going to be accessible to the public?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, yes, the roads that lead into the subdivision will be accessible to the public, and the pond would also be.
Great, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Heath. This is a bit of a unique request, but that open ditch area, did you look at that? I know it's not super common to keep those open, but I wanted to get your take. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, we did look at it. As the map showed that Marissa provided, and as this also shows, that lateral is piped up and down Victory Road. We've spoken with Nampa Meridian, their general preferences that they would be piped for more efficient delivery. So we are proposing that it be covered in this case.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes. Go ahead.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question. I know.
Oh, shoot.
Yep.
Lisa,
Yep.
you're going in and out. Turn off your camera and we'll
Am I
try.
frozen? All right, how's it going now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I just had a question regarding the houses. If it turns out that they're not able to make it through this process, is there any possible way to honor the heritage of the twins and the work that they did to create these homes?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sanchez, yeah, we are proposing to honor that in two ways. One is that we would do an interpretive plaque around the pond. So we would be working on that with the current seller, the seller of that property, and the current owner who has a relationship with the family. And then in addition, as mentioned, we would be working to allow SHPO to come in at the State Historic Preservation Office to come in and take pictures and document and go over all of that so that there is a permanent record that's made by professional historians.
Thank you. Is there a possibility for SWACA to be involved in giving some input on that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sanchez, happy to have input. We want to make sure that the professional historians are doing that work. But we will make sure that any of those reports are provided to SWACA, and always happy to have conversations.
Great, thank you, Mr. Clark.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
So Heath, back to the trees a little bit. You said that you can retain some around the pond. Do you know how many of those?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, yes, I'm gonna pull up it. This is in your report in the new tree report that we provided, and I'm trying to grab that for you here real quick.
Well, I was trying to decipher what it was saying to me, so I do appreciate your interpretation.
Sure. Yeah, so what it does is on the conclusion page, I think that's page 53 of the project report, it speaks to 93 sumac, 3 pine around the pond. And so somewhere in the range of 96 trees around the pond, and then an additional give or take 100 down along the southern boundary. And again, those are identified by tree type.
Okay, thank you. So follow up on that. If I look at the detailed site plan that shows, I think, the existing trees as well as some proposed ones, there also appear to be some relatively healthy trees along the, I guess it would be southeastern edge of what's still uncovered in terms of the canal. And although I know that those are being developed as lots with access from your access road, it appears to me that there's possibility to preserve a few of those trees. And I could tell you, if I were a homeowner there, I'd sure love to have a tree like that in my front yard rather than plant it from scratch. And I just wonder if any of those were considered also for preservation.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, what we asked the arborist to do was to go out and review all of the trees on site. Certainly, where we can preserve a tree, we are going to preserve the tree. It's less expensive for us. It's good for the homeowners. I I think that the ultimate principle here, though, should be the preservation on a 1-to-1 ratio, where we will preserve them if we can. If we can't, and it was a healthy tree, then it would show in the mitigation plan as having to be replaced.
Okay, that's helpful. I just wanted to bring it up to understand that. I think that's all I have. Oh, wait, there was one other thing. If on the northern edge along Victory, you're going to do a detached sidewalk, is there room for a deceleration lane and a shorter curb radius on the right turn onto Mitchell as a traffic calming measure rather than the typical 35-foot curb radius from an arterial onto a collector? And would that make sense for a short distance at the very end, recognizing that at least for that distance, probably along the edge of lot 4, the sidewalk either might not be detached or would be detached much less? Do anyone ever think about that? That might be a traffic calming feature that would slow the traffic down naturally when that crossing goes in at Mitchell, because I can tell you, even though it may not be warranted today, it's going to be.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I believe I'm tracking. I think my response would be that we are dedicating the additional right of way there to allow for eventual future widening. I'm hesitant to speculate as to whether what ACHD's plan there could accommodate that as well. We certainly would be supportive of ACHD, revisiting that and identifying whether there is a warrant and looking at alternatives at that point. But at this point, it's difficult to speculate as to what they might change in terms of the design there, because what they've told us that they want is based on the current status of not having a warrant for the pedestrian crossing. So it might, I don't know that I'm answering your question very well. And the other point that I would just make is that the report does point out that this still is showing on the 2021 to 2025 CIP. I know Marissa found some other data. I'm not sure what that is, but ACHD's report does show it in that time frame as being improved. So there will be an opportunity in connection with that to revisit some of those dimensions.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, thanks. All right, it looks like there's nothing further for you, Heath, right now. So with that, we will go into the public testimony. So first off, I'm looking at the time. Okay. I think I said that we'd start with people in person, and I think that does make sense. So I have a sheet here that I'll go through, and then if there's anybody else that wanted to testify that's not on here, just let me know. Misty Daniels. Okay, great. And just to make sure, so first Jill and then Steve, you both have signed up, so that's fine. And then you'll follow? Okay, great. That sounds good. So let's just go with that for now, Jill.
Take my mask off to speak.
You may.
I tried to speak to planning and zoning with the mask on, and I nearly suffocated myself. I wasn't used to it. But, after a while, I felt I was gonna have a hard time. This is my first foray into talking about planning and zoning issues, and I have to tell you, my eyes have been opened, and I am very grateful to you, Madam Mayor, and to the rest of the City Council for your patience and your willingness to step in and help us keep Boise an awesome city, because this is way more daunting than I ever realized.
Jill, I've got it here on paper, but I need you to read your name.
9900 Roan Meadows. My property would border, I have an acre property that borders off of Roan Meadows. What now is proposed to be 3 separate lots on the south border of this proposed subdivision would touch my property, which is roughly a little less than 150 feet wide at that area. One of the things I wanted to tell you all is we understand as neighbors, we're opposed to some things about this development, but we're not opposed to the development. We get that it's going to happen. like it or hate it, Boise's growing and we all have to accommodate it. We know that there are going to be developments here and we all have to live with it. We're fine with that. The concern that we're having is some of the things about this development are not consistent with what we think is in the appropriate character of this neighborhood in this area. When I looked at the Boise blueprint, which I'm sure you all are very familiar with, there were 3 primary focuses that I pulled from those 7 factors that I thought were really important and I wanted to bring up with you. One is the predictable pattern of the development. One is the environmental soundness or stewardship of the area. And the other is the safety of the community. As to the unpredictability, we all know that government, in order to be effective, we have to know and anticipate what you're going to do. We have to know what the laws we can't violate are, so we know not to do that. In this instance, the purpose of the Boise blueprint and the comprehensive plans to kind of give us an idea what's going to go on. We understand that this isn't set in stone, that there are no other options, but there needs to be a reason for varying from it. When I went to the Planning and Zoning Commission, one of the folks asked Mr. Holmes, well, you know, basically, why would we vary from this and approve a different planning or a different zoning, which is what they're asking for? His response, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, I'm going to paraphrase, but it shocked me because it basically was, well, if we're going to do it, we might as well do it here. And I wanted to hear a reason. Why would we not go ahead with the comprehensive plan that people put time and effort in? Give me a reason. And the only thing I can think of is because the commission kept saying over and over and over, well, they told us to approve everything so we could put more houses here. We know from SWACA that there are 5,000 approved lots that haven't been built. Why is it we have to change things? We're not in that big of trouble. These are not homes that are going to be affordable homes. They're not going to be entry-level homes. So why do we have to change things and allow for such a dense development in this area? Because they asked for it, and that's not predictability with government. And that's something that's very important to the neighbors that want to address you and talk about our concerns about that. One of the things that I am concerned about, I think you, Madam Mayor, said the word squishy terms about the trees in a prior approval. When I was listening to the developer talk, he said, well, it appears we're going to be able to save this many trees. It appears we can do this. That to me is a squishy word. The only time you have power as a city council and a mayor is to say, let's be specific and make it conditional on that. When there's this, well, we'll see if we can work it out later. And we keep hearing about these trees being old and having problems. The trees along the southern border were put there to put a barrier between the Allen property and the properties because all of our irrigation canals drain right onto those trees where they're proposing to put houses.
Your time's been up,
Okay.
so
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Jamie, could you say like time or something like that?
Oh, yeah. Could somebody take this down so that we can see who's behind us? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Steve Hickey. My wife and I, who's watching on Zoom, live at 3185 South Linda Vista Avenue within the Diamante subdivision, and our backyard lies directly across the proposed single entry exit to the music development. My wife and I selected this 1/2 acre property in Boise over developments in Meridian due to the semi-rural character of the neighborhood and southwest Ada County. We thoroughly enjoy the large lot that surrounds us with the horses, sheep, and other farm animals as we go for walks. The best, however, are the peacocks on the proposed development that call out. It's just a great sound that I will miss when this development moves forward. And make no mistake about my position. I understand and acknowledge that development is going to occur on this property. Had I known this prior to purchasing, I would have not bought here, but that's neither here nor there. The question before us boils down to how many homes are ultimately going to exist on this 18.5 acre property. To give you all an idea of what has changed in the 2 years that my wife and I have lived there, we've observed the following. An increase in cars cutting through Diamante to avoid the long lines that can swell to over 10 cars on Mitchell, waiting to make either a right or left onto West Victory. It affects our quality of life and puts the children in our subdivision in more danger. And if 67 homes per 2 cars per home, which is the national average, that's 134 more cars times the number of times they're going to be going out on those trips are going to be cutting through our division, our subdivision. At least one accident that we saw last winter from a car coming down the slope where Mitchell meets West Victory that was unable to stop due to icy conditions, going right into the westbound traffic. Fortunately, it was commute hours and the car going westbound was not traveling at the posted speed limit. Third, West Victory between Maple and Grove and 5 Mile during commute hours looks more like a California freeway than a 2-lane road. I hate to admit it to my neighbors on West Roan Meadows, to get to 5 Mile at times, I will cut through there so I don't have to deal with the intersection at Mitchell and West Victory. And finally, due to the recent decision by ACHD that the proposed widening of Victory Road to 5 lanes at Mitchell will not transpire until between 2036 and 24, I'm respectfully requesting that this body, 1, maintain the designation of this property as it was originally listed within Blueprint Boise on the land use map as a large lot, R1A, to maintain the semi-rural character. 2, remain in compliance with the Boise Comprehensive Plan, noting that I am agreeable with a planned unit transitioning with a planned unit of no less than 9,000 square feet lots on Victory Road, which is the R1B. What this developer is proposing to do is, and I noticed that when we were talking about the Moderna, Greenback, Culver, and Shire, they specifically wrote in their R1C, R1B, R1B, and R1C. What this developer wants to do is go from an R1A to an R1B and throw in some R1Cs along the north side of the development. And I would just stick with the plan. If it's going to be R1B, R1B. Third, placement of traffic calming measures at Mitchell. And finally, a left turn lane at Mitchell and Victory with consideration of a traffic light due to the traffic that swells up for those individuals coming from the Amity side, West Roan Meadows or ours, wanting to make a left or right on to West Victory. With that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, and then Misty. It's okay because it's not all an appeal, right?
All the appeal documents have to be on an appeal, and that would include some.
We didn't really think about the.
That was loud. I'm gonna take my shoes off and get comfortable. My name is Misty Daniels. I'm at 9957 West Roan Meadows Drive. And I want to say good evening to Madam Mayor, Madam President, and members of the council. Many of the approximately 150 concerned neighbors have met, and we agreed to write our concerns in one continuous document. I'll begin speaking, and then as needed, others will continue. First, we want to be clear that we do not oppose development in Boise, but want to ensure that these developments are thought through and planned with the future of Boise in mind. Some of our concerns include, number 1, lot size. We would like to request that this subdivision stay zoned at R1A zoning with a PUD starting at no less than 9,000 square foot lots at Victory, with transitioning lots to match the existing adjacent lots at 1 acre. Only a few years ago, the Diamante subdivision was developed with highly sought after half-acre lots. The surrounding neighborhoods that collect onto South Mitchell have 1 to 2 acre lots. At our last meeting, several Diamante neighbors stated that they were very happy with their 1 acre lots and that they specifically looked for those homes with more property, which is getting very difficult in Boise. South Creek subdivision neighbors said they picked their homes because of the bigger yards. They have room for trampolines, swings, and gardens. Blueprint Boise states it creates a clear vision for the future. Goal SWNC1 is to maintain and enhance the semi-rural character to the southwest. There is also a picture with a caption that reads, "Large lot development and large tracts of agricultural give the Southwest a semi-rural character." The house pictured on the photo numbered number 3 looks to have at least a half acre or more with no fencing. The Southwest Victory Mitchell area is designated as large lot in Blueprint Boise, and the music application derogates from the goals of the community. This existing semi-rural residential neighborhood is the largest, nearly a full square mile, of the few large lot designated areas that the Blueprint Boise has noted as worthwhile to retain and preserve. It was stated that the project meets both R1B zoning and the comprehensive plan. However, it does not because the 5,000 square foot lots. It was stated that the project meets the comprehensive plan's infill design principles, but it does not because the infill does not complement the scale and character of the surrounding neighborhoods. As you can see in the photo here, you can see the difference of the size of lots. Please note that if they met the requirement for R1B zoning, they would not be requesting modifications and variances.
Well timed.
Right
All right,
on.
is Darren next? Are you coming up next? That's who's on the sheet.
Tracy Price will be speaking next, followed by her husband, Ted Price.
Great. All right. That's all right. I'm thinking that the mic's not working. Oh,
There it is.
yeah, for some reason it just wasn't picking your voice up.
I talk normally very soft, so it's a good thing I've got the mic. So to pick up from where we left off, traffic and congestion. The statement was made by staff member in planning and zoning at 1 hour, 40 minutes, hearing that Victory is going to be widened 5 lanes in 2021 and 2025 timeframe, when in fact at that time it was not in the 5-year plan, but it was in the 20-year CIP plan. We believe this was a deceiving statement. We've been advised that just recently plans to widen Victory Road have now been included in the new 20-year plan with a time frame of the year 2036 to 2040, which will affect this subdivision and the traffic. Because of this, we called ACHD and spoke with Mindy. She was asked about the widening of the following roads: Victory between 5 Mile and Maple Grove, 5 Mile between Victory and Amity, Maple Grove between Victory and Amity. Her answer was none of them are in the 5-year plan except Maple Grove from Overland to Victory. Also, we believe it is important to note that according to ACHD, the last traffic report was in 2017 with a revisit for pedestrian crossing completed in 2018. There's been a lot of growth in the past 2 to 3 years, and we believe that another study is necessary before a tragedy happens at the intersection of Victory and Mitchell Roads. Many residents of Carolina subdivision across Victory at Mitchell Street have stated that the traffic is already bad and it's hard to get out onto Victory now, which I can concur. Whenever I get out there, it's hard when you have 2 people because there's a road right there at Mitchell across, and both of us trying to turn left, it's very difficult, or right. Traffic calming on Mitchell. Several neighbors complained about how bad it's gotten on Mitchell since they opened it up at the south end. South Creek subdivision, Bridgeport subdivision, as well as Amity School can now access Mitchell. Diamante neighbors complained of speeders coming through their subdivision to get on Victory. Bridgeport neighbors complained about speeders going through their subdivision to access Amity. Commissioner Blanchard, at 3 hours and 44 minutes of the planning and zoning hearing, stated Mitchell doesn't go all the way through and he doesn't envision people cutting through subdivisions. I can attest that it does happen. Mitchell Street has been open on the south end for some time now. They are already cutting through subdivisions as well as going down Wright Street, Roan Meadows, Bean Apple, and other ways closer to them. Commissioner Gillespie, at 3 hours and 34 minutes, said, and it's paraphrased, he questions the adverse impact of 67 homes compared to 40 homes. According to the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which is who ACHD uses for their traffic studies, one single-family home averages 9.44 trips daily, which would mean the difference between 67 homes and 40 homes would be an additional traffic on Mitchell and Victory of 254.88 daily trips. And I know my time's about up, but I want to thank you for letting us talk about this.
Oh, Ms. Price, thank you. Okay, so Ted, are you next?
I'm Ted Price. I live on 9901 Roan Meadows. Let me see if I can pick up where. I'll just start here. One of the neighbors asked the following questions on our Facebook page and trying to get the opinion of those that use South Mitchell to walk, jog, ride bikes, push strollers, and to drive on Mitchell. Have you had any unsafe experiences? The answer is yes. This is from a neighbor who regularly walks and jogs on Mitchell. Drivers fly down Mitchell. The 20-mile-an-hour speed limit means nothing to them. I say 80% of the people speed and have observed the majority of speeders turning into South Creek subdivision. Something needs to be done if they are planning to build more houses. By the way, of South Creek subdivision has 159 homes. That doesn't include the townhomes. The subdivision has 4 ways to get in and out of their subdivision besides using Mitchell Street. Another individual shares, I'm one of the guilty ones. That road, when it's empty, is easy to speed. I say put in speed bumps or dips. I can't think of any other road I ever speed on. Comments from the Bridgeport subdivision. Our neighbors have changed since they opened up Mitchell. Traffic has increased through our subdivision and we no longer walk on Mitchell due to the traffic and speeders. Our subdivision or our neighborhood has gone down in safety and its peaceful nature. I have seen near accidents with humans and animals. Another is nowhere near. There is nowhere to go on Mitchell if a car is crowding you out, especially if you're walking a dog. People do not follow the posted speed limit. I always get a little nervous when cars are coming down from both directions, especially on the hill when I'm not sure they'll see me. People definitely go faster than 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Mom and dad will walk or bike with their 3 kids, and people will fly down the street, and 20-mile-an-hour speed limit means nothing. I live on Mitchell, and I was walking, pushing a stroller, and saw a car going way faster than 20. I had to stop and go to the side of the road because they were that close to me. For this reason, we'd like to request the developer be required to install a flashing crosswalk at Mitchell and Victory Roads and speed bumps on Mitchell Road. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so signed up, I've got Darren Daniels. Great. And then Melvin Holman.
Stick in my pocket.
Oh, all right. Okay, thanks.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you for listening to me tonight. Darren Daniels, 9957 West Roan Meadows, Boise, Idaho, 83709. I'm going to pick up, and it's kind of got jotted around a little bit. I'm going to try to clean it up. The developer said that he would put in a left-hand turn on Mitchell, but wouldn't widen Mitchell. I'm not sure how this is going to be helpful if we just paint the existing road of Mitchell, because Mitchell is not more better than a gravel road up towards Idaho City, to tell you the truth, as far as width. So people with horse trailers, other agricultural that is trying to make that turn, large campers, etc., that is going to be an issue on Victory Road. That's going to be an issue on Mitchell Road for traffic coming out the other direction, coming in and out, etc. So that will be a problem. And there we go. And last rough count by SWACA, there are over the 5,000 empty lots that are still standing to be built in Ada County. So if we put more in here, how are we going to get all that? And are those lots going to sit, et cetera? Is it going to be excessive in use and not a good use of the land, actually? If they stayed with the R1B, minimum 9,000 lots, they're going to attract that individuals that can come in and get that because they're looking for that type of lifestyle that will match this area of the subdivision, which is semi-rural. And we agree with Mayor McLean when she stated, we need to protect what we love about our community, open spaces and clean water. We also need to available houses in Boise at every price point. So with this statement in mind, we would ask that the development be held to an R1A zoning and preserving the existing tree canopy, farmer's lateral, and the pond daylighted. You have no idea how nice it is to go for a walk at the evening with your wife, and you're walking down that section of Victory, and you go right close between the two properties there and heading towards Mr. Dunkley's properties, and you just feel that cool breeze hit you that's coming off of that open lateral. You close up that open lateral, that is going to create excess heat. That, you know, if we want to be good stewards to the environment, why do we want to continue to close off nature and stuff like that? That I really wish you could feel what I mean by that feeling of when you're just walking, all of a sudden you just feel that. You feel the pressure on your body, you feel the wind in your face, you can feel the coolness. I mean, and that's something we don't want to lose, not in this area of town. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just a quick question.
Jimmy, sorry.
I had a quick question for him before he walks away.
No, you're good. Darren, will you come back on up? Councilmember Halliburton has a question for you.
And it was Garrett.
I know it's hard. Oh, can you see him there?
Oh, there we go. Yes, sir.
So just because you brought it up, the canalway there, you've been around it, you've spent time around that little lateral, is that correct?
I'm just walking down Victory Road, going nightly strolls. That's how my wife and I get some evening exercise when we're walking. So we enjoy that all year round.
You know, does it run most of the year? Do you know how long it runs, that lateral?
Well, when it gets real cold, we don't go for a walk, so I couldn't tell you for sure, and I don't pay attention. But I know during the spring, summer, and the fall, it does.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Anything else?
Thank you.
All right.
Nope, it looks like that's it. All right, so I had on here signed up Melvin Holman. Melvin, are you planning on testifying? Nope, okay. All right. Anyone else in the room? Come on up.
I know this process.
And I don't have, if you'll just read your name
I
and
will be
address
happy
into the
to.
record, that'd be great.
I'm Mark Dunkley, reside at 10151 West Victory Road. I'm one of the owners of the property that we're trying to sell. And I'm happy to be here. I have lived in Boise since 1956. From 58. At that time, there was 34,000 people here. Currently, there's over 240,000 people. I like Boise today better than I do back in 1958 because of the population. There's more opportunity. We have great things here because of it. I'm selling my property and no one is going to have more influence than my wife and I on the change in our property. We're staying at our home because we love the area. We love our home. We love the plan that the developer has proposed. He is going to keep the pond, which none of these neighbors can ever see from their property or even their walks around the area. They cannot see the pond. They cannot see a lot of the trees that are on the inside of the interior of the property. Now with the development of this property, they will have the opportunity to enjoy the pond, enjoy the trees around this whole area. They'll have that opportunity to walk into the subdivision and see many of these trees. So I think that's a great benefit. And that's one of the reasons why I'm saying they're leaving the huge trees, and these are tall trees, 50 to 6 feet tall trees on the southern border. And those are a great barrier for those neighbors. They're only going to have, I like the transition where it's only 1.5 lots per acre on the south side. And I went around the neighborhood just for fun the other day, and really there's only 2 properties of 13 that surround our property that have any type of animals. Everyone will enjoy the wildlife better because of that. The lateral, the farmer's lateral, I can answer that question because it's on my property. It is there only during irrigation time, which is usually April through about October. So 6 months out of the year, it is dry. Traffic, ACHD has verified that the traffic will increase, but it will not increase to a point that is a problem as they see it on that road. Being a member of this community for 62 years, I can tell you, 30 years ago, people were complaining about traffic. 40 years, people were complaining. And 10 years from now, they'll be complaining about traffic also. So that's just something that just happens with progress. I apologize to my neighbors for selling my property. I'm getting old. I have a heart condition. My wife wants me to live. And so I'm tired of taking care of all the land. I want to address the historical building. Though it has some unique qualities, it does not have anything that I would think considered historical. I have 2 seconds. Thank you very much. And on behalf of the 67 people that might come to the subdivision, we'd like to have you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, I had on here Karen Dunkley as well.
Yes, she was going to testify, but she's not now.
Okay, all right.
She doesn't want to get in front of people, so.
All right.
Yeah, so you're good. Thank you.
There, Jimmy again.
Oh, yep. Jimmy's got a question. Councilmember Halliburton.
Yes.
Mr. Dunkley, thanks for making it down there today. I wish I could be down there with you. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about leaving a portion or multiple portions of that lateral open, or if that's just something that you don't think would add value to the subdivision.
I think with the where they're working on the pond area and the walkways around the pond area, I just don't see the lateral as important, and because it's not there's not water going down there 6 months out of the year, and so I just don't see that as being a benefit.
Sure, appreciate it, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, anybody else in the room? Okay, I'm going to move into the, actually, should we take a little break? It's been an hour and a half. We good? We keep going? Okay. Into the list that I have for people that signed up to do online testimony, and then we'll see if anybody else is there. Matt Carter. All right, we don't see a Matt Carter. Raise your hand through the little Zoom thing that allows you to raise a little Zoom hand if you're there. How about Steve Hamblett? Sounds like Mr. Hamblett's here.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hello there. Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. I'm going to try and continue on the document that they had. I kind of lost where they stopped at last, but from what I can tell, it looked like we were kind of going through the traffic calming measures. They had some information in here saying that the neighboring subdivisions that use Mitchell are Diamante, which has 20 homes in it with 2 ways to access it in and out. Walnut Ridge off of Seneca has 28 houses with 2 accesses in and out. South Creek has 159 homes with several townhomes and 4 accesses in and out. And then the last 2 subdivisions have closer ways to access out besides using Mitchell, but they still use Mitchell. Some important points from the Boise blueprint. It says to see photo 3. Community gardens, SWNC1, encourage use of public parks and other open spaces as space areas as community farms and gardens to preserve the rural and agricultural heritage of the Southwest. Urban agriculture, Southwest NC 1:2. Promote the continuation of existing agriculture in the Southwest and look for opportunities to expand urban agriculture and new developments. And then semi-rural characteristics, Southwest or SWNC 1.3. Open fencing and other design features shall be used to the greatest extent possible to retain the semi-rural characteristics of the Southwest. This says, please half-acre lots in here. We don't have any parks close by that have play equipment or picnic areas to give people and this gives people a yard so that they can have a safe place for their kids and grandkids to play and enjoy having a garden. At last, Rough Country by SWACA. There are currently over 5,000 empty lots standing ready to build on in the Boise area. We agree. Oh, okay. And this part they've already read. So, anyways, for me personally, I just kind of agree with everything that's already been said. If I go into any details, I'm just going to repeat what everybody else has been talking about. So, personally, I think they should keep the smallest lots at 9,000 square foot. That's pretty much what I got. So, thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Mr. Hamblett. All right, how about Cynthia Rasevich?
Hi, Cynthia Rasavage, 9801 West Arabian Drive, 83709. I actually live at the end of Mitchell and Arabian Drive, and I will tell you daily, we have people running the stop sign that ACHD kindly put up after I complained that we had no stop signs there after South Creek was put in. If ACHD went back and revisited all of the studies that they've done for every road that feeds into Mitchell, they will find out that every single road has had a traffic study done on it. It's hard to have 100 cars come in front of my house every day, but we are getting pretty close to that. The last study that I believe ACHD did on Mitchell near Ben Apple was 2018 after the road was opened in South Creek and my subdivision Bridgeport could go up that way. We were almost at 325 cars at that particular time. When I spoke to Ms. Battles about adding the 67 cars if one house had a car coming down Mitchell, she said we can't, as ACHD, we can't predict that they're actually going to do that and ask for traffic calming. Well, I'm saying that if you did a study today, 2020, we're going to be pretty close to the 400 cars that need to be on Mitchell. We have children that are at Seneca and Mitchell that are standing in the middle of the street at 7:30 at morning, waiting for a bus because there's snow, because we don't have any sidewalks. ACHD has zero plans for having sidewalks done, maybe after I'm gone and 6 foot under, but currently they don't. As they said, the plan is 2036 for the widening of Victory. We have some serious issues in this part of Ada County, and I would appreciate you guys taking in consideration the traffic and not allowing 66 houses going to music. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for joining us. All right, next up we have Barbara Crump. Oh, wait. You were here, right? Yeah. That's right, your name came up earlier this evening.
Madam Mayor, Madam President, Committee, I just want to thank you for your time today because it is so important. You've talked about those soft issues, and it is so important that this development that is coming in, and we know that and appreciate it because we know there are people who want to come to Boise, who want homes in this area. It's important we get that plan right, because 5, 10, 20 years down the line, we can't undo any decisions that are made today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, but Barbara, I need your name and address read into the record. No, I forgot to tell you.
I'm sorry, Barbara Crump, 3921 South Mitchell Street.
Thank you. Julianne Shaw.
Madam Mayor, there's no one online by that name.
All right. Linda Rain.
Madam Mayor, she was online, but no longer online.
Next time, I think I'll do this one. This is the first hearing we've had that's virtual with so many people in the room. So I think next time around, we'll take the people online first so that they can hang up if they so choose. And then we'll take everybody in the room. But we haven't, typically there's been maybe one person per item here with us. Anybody else online that plan to testify?
Madam Mayor, we have several people with their hands up online.
Great.
So the first person is Alexandra Monjar.
And please, if each of you will read your name and address into the record and then start with your testimony, we are ready. Welcome.
Hello, Alexandra Monjar, 2222 West Kootenai Street. As was stated earlier, because the city is considering annexation, I believe that we should consider whether and how approval of these ordinances needed for the project will serve the city. And I urge the council to not require larger lots than are currently proposed for this development. It is likely that more compact lots on this proposal allow the developer to maintain a larger percentage of open space that will benefit the entire community while meeting his financial targets. Requiring larger lots could shrink or remove this public benefit of open space and or ultimately increase the price of the proposed homes. I believe the more moral choice would be to approve as many homes as possible, as we are already experiencing a lack of supply, which seems likely to continue. Further, I believe that our city's needs for attainable housing and the neighbors' desire to preserve established trees and to maintain a rural character on this site could both be better served with a greater number of smaller lots and replacing a portion of single-family homes with townhomes or multifamily buildings. More compact development would allow even more space to be allocated for public space and amenities, potentially a small farm or garden or daylighting of the canal. I don't believe the council can address my later suggestion, but I hope that the council and members of the public will consider how these principles could be applied in the future for suburban infill considered semi-rural or in areas where neighbors currently enjoy the existence of mature trees and wildlife. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Alexandra.
May I ask for a clarification on her address?
Oh, sure. Are you still there, Alexandra?
Yes.
Would you please read your address into the record once more?
Yes, it's 2222 West Kootenai Street.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we also have Melina Hickey.
Great.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to add on with the R1B zoning that we need to really adhere to that. That would actually probably reduce the number of homes that would be built there. It would decrease the traffic on Victory and onto Mitchell. It would increase the security, hopefully, of all the children. Again, you have my address from my husband earlier. It's 3185 South Linda Vista Avenue. And again, it's Milena Hickey. I think the 9,000 square lot size is what we aim to. And I really appreciate you considering all that. We are right behind where they're going to build off of Mitchell. Our backyard is that. I came here because I wanted to have something a little more rural, and we just love that Boise is such a wonderful town, and hopefully you can keep it that way for all the people that are here. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Madam Mayor, I have no one else with their hands up. However, there are people online.
All right, if anybody online is hoping to testify on this item, you got to get your hand up now. Now's your chance.
Madam Mayor, we have Abby Lozinski.
Great, Abby.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hi, so my address is 9665 West Roan Meadows Court, Boise, Idaho, and I am in the Diamante subdivision as well. I agree with everything that my neighbors have said, but I do want to mention this one point that I don't think was brought up. Specifically, I have a kindergartner and a toddler, and I live too close to the schools for the buses to come out. So, you know, and that's a lot of the kids in this area, including those that go to Amity or Maple Grove. So these kids are walking to school, and that's really concerning, adding a large amount of traffic. I know we talked about that with the density, but even decreasing to the 9,000 or increasing to the 9,000 square foot for every lot would help with that. And that makes me feel better with my children, and for other people's children that'll be walking. So I just wanted to add that to the testimony. So thank you.
Thank you.
We have no one else with their hands up, Madam Mayor.
All right. Now, before we move into rebuttal, I'm going to see if anybody from council has questions for staff.
Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor.
Council President, we're going to have Council Bajent first. He got in the queue, and then we'll go to you.
It feels so non-deferential to the council president, but I hope she'll forgive me. My question for the staff was pertaining to the pond, and there was a consensus and agreement that the public would be able to have access to this pond going forward after development was done, which is great. I just recently read about some trouble that our neighbor Garden City had in this connection with colloquy at a city council hearing about access to the greenbelt and no actual papered binding commitment to that. So I wanted to flag it and make sure we get that so that later the neighborhood can apply for a block grant and get fish and have little kids go fishing there or whatever we do in the future. But I want to make sure that public access is properly protected.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent, I suppose that could be something that could be added to the homeowners association, CCNRs, to make sure that that remains open to the public. And that would be reviewed by the city's legal team to make sure it's in there.
Council President.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since we have Ryan on the line, I guess I would like to ask him just a couple of questions, make sure to clarify a couple of things. Welcome, Ryan. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Tough times here. It's been a while. So a couple of questions, just verifying that the 2036 year is the current year for any improvements on Victory in this stretch.
So yeah, the good, for the record, this is Ryan Head, Ada County Highway District, 3775 Adams Street, Garden City. The correct answer is the CIP that was adopted last week does show 2036 to 2040. That said, our proposed integrated 5-year work plan that is out for review at this point in time does propose design to start in 2025 with, I would expect, construction in the subsequent years. So long before what our CIP says, but that was just added this year into our integrated 5-year work plan.
Okay, thank you. In that plan, are there any improvements to Mitchell south of Victory to serve the new Amity School?
We've received a request from the city. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, Council President, we did receive a request from the city as well as the school district this last year for that project. We did scope it this summer and are just finalizing those costs so we can consider it for addition to our integrated 5-year work plan and subsequent updates.
Thank you. And then finally, the warrants for a crossing at Mitchell. I often hear there's no warrants for a crossing, nobody walks there. Well, nobody walks there because it's so dangerous to walk there that nobody walks there. My guess is if you put in a crossing, there would be enough people using it to have warranted it. So how do we overcome that chicken and egg question?
Absolutely, great question, Madam Mayor, Council President. What I expect is that with the widening of with our planned improvement to Victory Road, I would fully expect that there would be an improvement at that location, at minimum a pedestrian crossing. Prior to that, we can look at that and investigate that from the perspective and verify those counts. But ultimately, I would fully expect when we improve Victory Road for that improvement to go in.
That's a ways to wait. And so I guess in the interim, if ACHD were to invest in the conduit and mast arms for a hawk, would those be reusable as signal arms if and when the other improvements go in?
Madam Mayor, Council President, I'm not an expert in terms of the reuse of those. We do typically try to reuse as much equipment as possible when we relocate them or when we improve a roadway. But I can't for sure state that that would be the case.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks, Ryan. Other questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
I think that this is probably a question for Kevin. So Kevin, a lot of the testimony we heard tonight supported going to a straight R1B zoning designation with 9,000 square foot lots. It's my understanding that because we have smaller lot sizes, the developer's able to provide amenities as well. Do you know right offhand, if the amenities were taken out, how many lots would be in this development under just straight R1B?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, it's tough to know exactly how, even though the road layout is it's kind of set where it is just based on the access points. So you can take a guess at it. And really, you'd probably be looking at losing about a third, I imagine, though the applicant may have done a more in-depth analysis than that and to exactly what that would look like.
Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor, can I ask the same question of Heath? Heath, do you know right offhand?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, I don't know right offhand what the specific number would be. But again, what we're trying to do and what the code contemplates with the use of a PUD is to try to create a variety of housing types and to preserve room and create that flexibility to be able to do that type of an amenity. But no, I don't have a calculation of exactly how many lots would be saved if the amenity went away.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, then we're going to move into rebuttal. Marissa went first, she goes last. Heath, you're there, and you're up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street, representing the applicant. I'll try to be quick, and I'm going to break this up into two kind of categories. First, we have the appeal on the PUD, and again, it is the burden is on SWACA to carry that their arguments on appeal. And we do believe that P&Z did not err. SWACA did not show that there's an incompatibility with the existing neighborhood. The proposed zoning and density are within those that are identified in Blueprint Boise. They did not show an alleged adverse effect. The effect they identified in their appeal briefing was drainage, and that occurs offsite and upstream. And as is typical, that would be addressed during the grading permit phase. Your public works folks will review that and make sure that that's taken care of. And then finally, SWACA didn't establish that the project fails to comply with Blueprint Boise. R1B is a permitted zone for this land use area, and we are within the permitted density of 4.8 units per acre. In fact, we're at 3.6, so we're significantly below that. They haven't carried their burden, and there's not a basis to overturn that PUD approval. With regard to the remaining applications, the proposed R1B with a PUD is consistent with area development, and it's appropriate for development on Victory Road. And I can't emphasize that enough. We want to encourage development along significant transportation corridors. All of the relevant agencies have commented. ACHD has reviewed the traffic impacts. Ryan gave you the update on the plans for future improvements. With regard to that, I would just add that Mitchell is required to be widened to a 36-foot street section. And with that widening, the left turn will be added. I think that addresses some of the concerns that were brought up. With regard to safety, there will be improvements on our frontage. As you've noted, as Council President Clegg's noted, that there will be the detached sidewalk along Victory and along Mitchell. That'll help address, safe routes to schools to the extent that is within our power to do so. And I would just wrap up by saying this, this is again infill on a transportation corridor. It provides a variety of lot sizes, and it uses tools that are provided in your code to create an amenity using the PUD while still providing appropriate suburban infill densities. And we think this is a good infill project, and we'd ask for your approval, and happy to answer any follow-up questions that might come up.
Thanks. Looks like we're good. All right. Come on up, Marissa. Your volume's low. I think just.
Now, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
President Clegg and Ryan had kind of took some of my points. But I wanted to start with that it's our understanding that annexation and rezone, when those two things occur, that City Council has pretty significant powers as the land use agency to put in some extra conditions on the property or on the development. Excuse me. So regarding the affordable housing debate, if Boise needs 20,000 lots, 20,000 units to provide housing for all the people that want to come here, with our 5,000 plus lots in SWACA that are still yet unbuilt, like that's 25% of the goal right there. As one of the neighbors said, that this will not be affordable housing for Idaho wages. It will be affordable for some, but not for a lot of people. I believe the problem is not a lack of approved lots. It's a lack of the resources and the labor available to build those lots quickly enough. And that's why we have some of the housing issues that we are having. We've talked a lot at SWACA about how do we help provide affordable housing in our area. We do have a lot of low-income families that live in SWACA. It would be awesome if we had a subdivision come along that was large lots with everyone had an ADU in the back that provided a more affordable rental instead of all of the properties being expensive houses. And these houses will probably sell in the range of $400,000, I imagine, just based on what some of the other houses in our area are going for now with comparable lot sizes. So as far as the CIP, as Ryan had stated, that was an adopted plan by ACHD last week. I know that because I watched it and I testified in it, and the budget hearing is tomorrow if anyone wants to watch that. ACHD is my hobby. So as far as traffic calming, that is SWACA's next project. In order to get traffic calming on a collector, we need to have a petition by the neighbors. 50% of them, 50 to 75% of them have to sign it before ACHD would even look at what sort of traffic calming measures they could provide. And that doesn't guarantee that they would do them after that. So adding more traffic to an area that's already a problem, as we've heard, without any guarantee from the road agency that they will do something about it, is pretty concerning. And I have spent a lot of time in this neighborhood. The neighbors have had a lot of meetings to discuss the issues, and I've observed, like last night, there was a car pickup full of teenage boys driving probably 45 miles an hour up and down Mitchell. And those sort of things happen on a regular basis for these people. There was, as far as the lot size, we still maintain that it is not compatible with the lots within the same land use category. It's not even compatible with the lots to the north, which are in the suburban land use category. One of the neighbors handed me her notes from the planning and zoning meeting, and she said at an hour 36, Commissioner Stevens asked the developer if he was not allowed to have 5,000 square foot lots if the pond would be taken away. And I believe, according to this, it says the answer was no, that the pond would stay because it is an amenity. It will make the neighborhood better, more sellable, more marketable when you have those amenities. People don't just want to live in a place where there's just houses. They want those amenities. So we would still ask that the primary zoning be R1A and possibly do the 9,000 square foot lots along Victory up to the 20,000 square foot lots and do the PUD that way, rather than start with the 5,000 square foot lots along Victory. We think that would be more compatible there.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. Right, with that, we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I just want to say, I don't expect to be voting tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming down. It was wonderful to see faces of people, but particularly your willingness to do as we've asked in City Hall, which is come in safe ways, follow COVID protocols, think of your neighbors and others in this building, staff included. And so I really appreciate that, that you're here as you are, and that you've come down, and of course, everybody that's online as well. And also just in general, really the evolution of the neighborhood and the projects that you're thinking about, traffic calming and all those things. It's great to hear. And so good to hear from all of you tonight. So thanks for being here. And with that, the hearing's closed and a motion is properly before us.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I guess we're addressing these all separately, correct? All three? Okay. Well, I'm going to then start, Madam Mayor, with the annexation and rezone or zone of R1B. So I'm going to move that we approve the annexation of 19.6 acres at 9933 and 10151 West Victory Road with an R1B zone.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'll be supporting this motion with the understanding that all of the other things that we've talked about tonight that will go along with the PUD will be required in order for this zone to work. So the reason for that is that I don't believe, once we get to it, that there has been error shown in the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission. It doesn't mean that I don't think that there aren't some concerns of SWACA that aren't valid in terms of transportation and needed improvements in the area that have been long lagging development. I think this has been particularly true in the Boise part of Southwest, as it grew so long ago and now is having to deal with traffic not only from redevelopment within its own area, but also from traffic moving through from the west with new development. And often that new development is somewhat better served by transportation improvements than the pieces that exist in Boise. So recognizing that, I know that Marissa knows I've long advocated that ACHD come up with a comprehensive solution for this part of our valley, this part of our city, that they can afford to do in the lifetimes of the people who live here. And I will continue to advocate for that. But absent that happening tonight, I do believe that I can see any error in the planning and zoning decision, and with that can support the rezone as it's proposed.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
This is a really quick growing part of Boise. And I think that everyone here understands and appreciates that. And that's what I heard from everyone who lives out here. Most people said that you're not opposed to development. There were some concerns with this specific development that I'll address later. But right now, what's before us is the annexation. I think that this is a contiguous annexation. It makes sense. The R1B zoning makes sense given the surrounding developments. And so that's for that reason I made the motion.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Council.
Yes, briefly, thank you. I will be supporting this motion. I as many know, I live way out in West Boise and am also used to seeing the rapid growth and development, and am aware of and feel the same growing pains that all of you are witnessing and seeing. But we certainly are in need of dramatic increases in the number of housing in our city. I think that this particular rezone and annexation is appropriate, in particular the R1B, and many of the aspects that have gone into this development, from the transition and the efforts to save the pond, ensure that that's part of the public access. And I think there's been a good effort along the trees as well. And I appreciated the buffer that was put in. So I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I generally agree with my colleagues. The first thing we do is ask for mistakes or errors, and disagreements don't always count. The thing that I'm most concerned about is that it's pretty tough to say in a credible way that approving this preserves the semi-rural character of Southwest Boise, which is called out expressly in Blueprint Boise. This development does not preserve semi-rural character. It references it or gestures to it with ponds and things like that, but it is a transition to a different type of use. And this is a problem that we have over and over, because Blueprint Boise envisions balancing certain standards in different ways. It's not an ironclad set of rules, but you're right. When you come and you say the comprehensive plan, the plan in Blueprint Boise says to preserve the semi-rural character of Southwest Boise, and it calls it out as an objective, and this does not further that objective. And I want to own that. It doesn't. It does further other objectives in the plan, and there is a balancing that's going on here, and that's what we're doing. But I don't want you to feel like you said those things and we didn't listen, because on that point, I do think you're right.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate what Councilmember Bajent just said as far as preserving that semi-rural or rural aspect of your community. I rode my bike out to one of the SWACA Neighborhood Association meetings several months ago, and I don't ride on the sidewalk very often, and it was one of the few times that I got up and rode on the sidewalk. And when you're on Victory, it doesn't feel real rural when there's that many cars going by. So I definitely understand, and I understand that there's a park across the street and a library across the street as well. And I think that there are some advocates at the city who will be happy to push for safety when it comes to, crossings at those areas. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to say it as far as the different motions that we'll have to make. I do think that there are some ways to preserve some of that rural and semi-rural community. I think Councilmember Bajent, made sure to mention if there is going to be public access to that pond, that we make sure that that's explicitly stated in the agreement. And I think that when you talk about historic preservation, there's a few different things there. There's, the houses, and it sounds like those will be preserved in a way of, commemorating them. And that doesn't sound exactly like what the neighborhood association is looking for. There is the pond that is being preserved. And then there's also the lateral. And in Blueprint Boise, I think that we do show that there is an effort to daylight laterals and try to keep those open. And I guess I don't know if there would be any council members that would be willing to discuss if there's an ability to leave or partially leave some of that lateral open in a way to both kind of speak to Blueprint Boise, but also kind of to preserve that semi-rural atmosphere. So that's kind of, I guess, maybe a question or some discussion that I would open to other council members.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if I could just respond to Councilmember Halliburton first off, that would be a discussion for the PUD and not for the rezone. And I think I'm willing to have that discussion there, but I think we'll find that because this is an appeal, there's not much opportunity in this particular case.
Sure.
Right. Further discussion on this matter? All right, we'll go ahead and call the question. Will you read the roll, please?
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right, Madam Mayor, the next item is the appeal. I would move that we deny the appeal of PUD 20-13, South Point LLC 9933 and 10151 West Victory Road. Deny the appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 67 detached single-family homes on 18.5 acres in a proposed R1B zone.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion on this.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I think just to echo what Council President Clegg has already said, one of the things that we have to do in order to uphold an appeal is to find error in the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision. And as far as I could see, no error was made. They duly deliberated. I read the minutes of their meeting and found their decision to be sound.
Madam Mayor.
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to ask the maker of the motion. I believe this will be the appropriate motion because it is a PUD which does offer conditional conditions. This would be the appropriate place to condition the application to make sure that the pond is open to the public, that access to the pond is open to the public. And I guess I would suggest that it either be through the CCNRs or with a plat note or both, whichever is the most binding, based on discussion with our legal counsel, and ask that to be returned to us at a later date. Are you willing to include that as part of your motion, I guess is my question.
Yeah, President Clegg, Elizabeth has something to say.
We will do that, and our recommendation would be a plat note.
Okay. Great, thank you. So with that then, my comments, we've had a couple of questions online on the chat. Why if it's R1B or 5,000 square foot lots allowed. They're actually not 5,000, they're 5,500 and up or so. The reason for that is that this is a PUD, and what that offers is the ability to do a variety of both lot sizes and layouts in order to achieve the transition. A straight subdivision in an R1B zone would require that every lot be the same or relatively close to the same size or larger. And you could achieve the same density, the same number of units with that. I think even with preserving the pond, as I looked at the property and took out the pond area, but you wouldn't get the same transition on the south. I know it's not the preference of the neighborhood, but it was duly considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and substituting our rational judgment for theirs is not what we're here tonight to do. What we're here tonight to do is to understand if they made an error in making that rational judgment, and I simply can't find one. So having said that, that I will be supporting this motion. I do believe it's, as I stated before, time to work hard in this part of town to provide some of the other things that should come along with growth, particularly the transportation improvements.
Others? All right, it looks like with that, clerk, you'd call the vote.
Madam Mayor, just a point of
Oh,
order.
yes, sorry.
We just had a condition added to the original motion.
Was that an addition, a condition, or it was, wasn't it? Although the maker of the motion would have to add that. Council President Clegg, it's.
Yes.
Sorry.
My question for the maker of the motion is whether she was willing to add that condition. It seemed like she was. I don't know if the seconder agreed.
It was my understanding that our legal counsel said that we would add that to the plat note.
Yeah, I believe it could be construed as part of what the original was and that we were just clarifying it there.
Right, that it
So
would.
the motion is good.
The motion stands, and with return of plat note, it'll be noted. Okay. Does that work, Council President?
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And Madam Mayor, I move that we approve SUB 20-9, Boise City Preliminary Plat, Music Subdivision 9933 and 10151 West Victory Road, preliminary plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 67 buildable and 6 common lots on 18.5 acres in a proposed R1B zone.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. All right, clerk.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right, thank you. And with that,
Madam Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, goodbye, everybody.